Pour some more coffee here.
All right. I wanted to start off with a little quote and see what we think of it because it's interesting. I was reading it while your computer was crashing. Was Plotinus one of a group organized on the globular Sephiroth when he was thrice united with God while still in his body? It is by sorrow and labor, by love of all living things, and by a heart that humbles itself before the ancestral light, and by a mind whose power and beauty and quiet flow through without end, that men come to adeptship, and not by the multiplication of petty formulae.
Nice.
What do you think of that?
I like that.
That is by W.B. Yeats from, I believe, some of his, I'm not sure if that's part of his published or unpublished notes, but I've been reading The Unicorn, which is pretty far out book, because the author basically had a field day when Regardie's rituals got published and said, hey, I can now take those rituals and assume that Yeats went through them and write about that. And of course, the irony, of course, is that those probably aren't exactly how it was for him. But she went and wrote this massive book, which academics love to talk about because it's just a very far out spiritual interpretation of W.B. Yeats. And of course, I love talking about W.B. Yeats. So I thought we'd start with a little word from someone close to both our hearts, hopefully. And welcome, Lenny, to Magic Without Fears, Hermetic podcast. You're in sunny Edinburgh.
Close. I'm in sunny Livingston in Scotland.
Okay. Yeah. Not Edinburgh.
It's not far from Edinburgh.
Suburbs, sort of. All right. Yeah. Edinburgh still remains one of my favorite cities of all times. Like Prague, Edinburgh. The castle was uncleaned when I was there. It was before it was cleaned, so it had a very dark Gothic look in '97. The main Edinburgh just dark, and it was like, whoa. And so we hung out there a lot and climbed the hill where the thistles are. I had a thistle in my notebook from there for 25 years later until the notebook got lost, and slid down that hill and went through the stinging nettles, which I'd never encountered in my life before. So I was like, ow, what's that? And my Scottish friend was like, oh, you're fucked.
Right, we have stinging nettles all over the place in Europe. I mean, it's all over the place in the UK. It's all over the place back in Denmark, and it's a fantastic medicinal herb, but it's an obnoxious weed in Europe, and people rip them up all over the place because they just want to get rid of them, right?
Yeah.
But it's a fantastic medicinal herb.
I've had nettle tea, and I think you can make soup out of it even.
You can.
Yeah.
You can actually.
Crazy Scots. But you're not Scottish.
Crazy Danes too.
Yeah.
We used to make nettle soup back in the day too. That was before my time, but it's something I heard a lot. I heard a lot about it from my grandparents about nettle soup. I don't recall if I've ever had it though. I might have had it once when I was a kid, just for fun. And my grandma might have made it for me at one point. I seem to have some kind of vague recollection of that, but I do remember that my grandparents spoke about it. So it was definitely before my time. It wasn't popular when I was a kid. I'm not that old.
No. Thankfully, you're not that old yet. That's a Masonic ring you're wearing. And I think we are going to talk a lot about Freemasonry today. And I guess I think one of the first things a lot of people are curious about that has fascinated me from our many conversations is the role that Edinburgh and Scotland play in Freemasonry. That is sometimes it's well known and even celebrated. I mean, that's why we have the Scottish Rite. But I think it's not quite known how pivotal Scotland has been to the development of Freemasonry. For example, how early the first Masonic halls and temples and groups have been around. I was a believer in the sort of the bourgeoisie above the pub in the 18th century story, which is quite popular. But you know more about this, so maybe you could start off by describing what you've hinted at to me in the past about the illustrious background of Edinburgh and Lodge Zero, if that's what you call it, and all of that sort of stuff, so people know the depths that we're going to plumb.
All right. Well, I'd be happy to. Well, as I've mentioned to you before, when you and I have just been talking about it privately, and also what you touched upon right now, that classical tale about Freemasonry started in England in the 18th century, in the early 18th century, right? With these 4 lodges that came together at the Goose and Gridiron Tavern and, at that pub, and then decided to create the first Grand Lodge. Now, it's true if you say, well, the first Grand Lodge of Freemasonry was established that way in London. But that's hardly the beginning of Freemasonry. And that's the story that's usually spun. That was how Freemasonry began, but that's not the case. Actually, Freemasonry has its origins. I mean, if we just for a second ignore the origins, looking at medieval stonemasonry and so on, we can get into that a bit later. But what we trace back, and that's not just us as Scottish Freemasons, that's academics as well who are not Freemasons, but historians who just find Masonic history particularly interesting and fascinating. And it has been agreed upon by these academics that the beginnings of what has now come to be known as Freemasonry, those beginnings are found in Scotland. And they date back to what we call the Shaw Statutes that were originally written by William Shaw, the King's Master of Works, back in 1598 and 1599. They were originally written in 1598, and then there was a revised edition in 1599. That's a longer, more complicated story that I'm sure would just bore people to tears. But sorry?
And what are the statutes?
The Shaw Statutes are basically, to put it briefly and kind of roughly, crudely, but they're basically a collection of rules that were implemented by William Shaw to sort of organize and systematize the lodge system in stonemasonry. And so there are different rules, such as how things need to be governed and regulated. They're mostly operative in nature, so there's not much in terms of speculative masonry and that. It's operative masonry, so it's about how master masons are allowed to work, and how entered apprentices, or apprentices as it was called then, were permitted to work, and things you can do and you cannot do, and if you do that you have to pay a fine, and then those fines are then used for charities. Different fines that are paid for people having to suffer some kind of penalty for having broken the rules or whatever, then whatever is paid for those fines will then be given to charities. But yeah, so it's a bunch of do's and don'ts and how things need to be organized and systematized, et cetera, et cetera. That's basically what the Shaw Statutes are. So this is the first time that masonry has become that, or the lodge system in stonemasonry has become that organized, that structured thing that would lead to how things run today. And that's why we trace it back to those Shaw Statutes. And it was ever since those Shaw Statutes were implemented, and this is one of the most important things, that lodges began to have minute books, and they began to have to write down everything whenever they had meetings and so on. And that's why the oldest lodge minute book entries in the world are Scottish. They are from a lodge known as Lodge St. Haven back in early 1599. Unfortunately, that lodge doesn't exist anymore, but the second oldest lodge a few months later in 1599 is the Lodge of Edinburgh, Mary's Chapel number 1. So that is the oldest Masonic lodge in the world, still extant Masonic lodge in the world, because it's still there in Edinburgh. It's still ticking, and it's been around since 1599, and there's no other Masonic lodge in the world that predates that one, at least that can provide proof for it. Then there's the whole thing with, as you mentioned, the number 0, or number nothing, as we say. It's a Lodge Mother Kilwinning number nothing.
Number not.
Well, right, wink, wink. But that's what we call Lodge Mother Kilwinning number nothing over here. And that was a number that was given to the lodge because the lodge has some very, very solid claims to being the oldest lodge in Scotland, and thereby also the oldest still extant lodge in the world. But unfortunately, there is no documentation to prove it. And you have to go with what you can document by having a scrap of paper that has a date and says such and such on it. And the oldest lodge in that case is the Lodge of Edinburgh, Mary's Chapel. And that's why that one was given number 1. But then the Lodge Mother Kilwinning was then eventually given that number to honor its claims to being the oldest lodge in the world, in spite of it not having documentation to prove it, right? But it has a lot of other things that supports the claim, and that's why it was given that number. So that's the whole thing about Kilwinning, and that's why there are various lodges in Scotland that are named Kilwinning. As far as I'm aware, there are actually lodges, I think, in Canada as well, that are named Kilwinning something in honor of that lodge.
Wow. So yeah, it's remarkable. I think people will be fascinated to hear confirm that masonry in some ways does come out of actual stone masonry, that it is older than some of the more recent historians have assumed, certainly more recent than some of the books I've read through a bit.
Right.
When do we know exactly when the very
as I said, medieval stonemasonry is what modern day Freemasonry came out of.
did it just literally grow out of that guild?
That's what it grew out of, right? I mean, it started off with the craft guilds, right? And then eventually, because the craft guilds were not adequate, so to speak. I'm not really putting that in the best of terms, but for lack of a better way of putting it, they were not really adequate, or they weren't sufficiently capable of dealing with the unique situation of the craft of stonemasonry. And that's the reason why the lodge system started to become implemented. I mean, lodges in stonemasonry were originally just smaller structures that people could work under, shading from the sun, that kind of stuff. And then eventually grew to a bit more where people would eat, under some kind of roof. They would eat there, they would sleep there, rest there, and then get back to work. They would store their tools there, and eventually it grew into something more. And eventually, in time, the lodge became more than just a structure, and it became a term used for the actual collective of the rules and regulations and the thing that made up that body of Masons. That was where that term lodge started to be used in that fashion, and no longer just indicated a physical structure. But stonemasonry itself, I mean, if you look back to ancient Egypt when the pyramids were built, whoever was involved in that, well, they would be classified as stonemasons, right? So again, that's why we have the stories about stonemasonry dates back to ancient Egypt and this and that. But of course, modern day Freemasonry does not make that claim. In the sense of traditional history, there are of course connections there, but in terms of factual history, we say no, because there are too many differences culturally and this and that, So what we can trace our roots to directly is that medieval stonemasonry. Yeah. And the reason why we are so proud of the history that we have of Freemasonry here in Scotland is because it is a really rich and fascinating history, and because we have the strongest link in existence between operative masonry and speculative masonry. Whereas if you look, and this is not to say anything ill of our English brethren or anything, not at all, but it appears that the way Freemasonry was kind of implemented in England seems to have been very much a speculative thing from the very get-go. Regardless of the origins of Freemasonry still being operative stonemasonry, right?
Yeah.
But that in England, it was very much a speculative thing from the very get-go, and that made it easier to, just get started like that, if you will. Whereas in Scotland, there is that really, really strong tie to operative masonry, because lodges like the Lodge of Edinburgh, Mary's Chapel, number 1 that I mentioned, that used to be an operative Masonic lodge. Speculative Freemasonry was a development that happened because of the symbolism and the interpretation, the philosophical, if you will, interpretation of the tools and the operative mechanics, et cetera, of masonry, of stonemasonry. That was what led to speculative masonry. But we can't really say, we can't pinpoint specifically when speculative masonry began, because first of all, we don't have any evidence to say it began right here on this Tuesday, right there. We don't have anything to say that. And because it was this developmental process, I mean, we have records of some of the earliest so-called speculative masons being initiated into a lodge. Like, so meaning people who were not stonemasons by profession, but they were still initiated into a Masonic lodge. So that was clearly because they had an interest in this speculative element. So we know that speculative element has been there for a long time. But even though we have records that state, like back in 1634, also in Scotland, I will have you know, that's actually also the oldest.
You really have gone native.
record.
You've gone native, eh, bro? You've gone fully native.
Well, you know, I love it here. How can you do anything?
Scotland's
integrate
amazing.
100%.
Scotland's amazing. When I had to decide between activating my UK ancestry status or going with Irish citizenship, I had to make a decision because they weren't going to let me have 3 passports. I know for people who do have 3 passports, there are workarounds to that, but who wants the hassle? I mean, if you really love filling out forms and dealing with the government bureaucracies, right. I mean, go for it. But like, so I decided I went with the UK largely because of Scotland. I was like, you know, I could be sort of stuck just in the Republic of Ireland, or I could have access to Scotland, Northern Ireland, and the whole UK. So the decision was obvious for me because Scotland's just like, you know, plus if you're in Northern Ireland, it's pretty easy to go to the south unless they put up another wall, which we all know how that will turn out. You see that Irish guy on the news, if you put up a wall, people will shoot at it. If you put up a wall, they'll blow it up. It's just a fact. Like, it's true. It's so true. Don't put up any walls in Ireland, bros. Please don't do it. Asking for trouble. Maybe then. So I've got. There's a lot of Freemasons and amongst my friends and students and podcast listeners, and so I have some very cool questions for you. So how about I get to go straight into one of them? Where is it? Where's the first one?
Oh yeah, please, by all means. Yeah, because if you just ask me to talk about something, as you've probably gathered from what I tried to explain just now, I went, you know, far and wide and covered all kinds of stuff.
I think it's
so
called,
much to tell. It's
called knowing your stuff. Right, you know your stuff.
Or difficulty
and
on point.
we're gonna get to other things. We're gonna talk about the Discovery of Witchcraft, which is a book your company is putting out, and all your other publishing works. We actually have a listener question about occult publishing for you. But here you go for Lenny, and I'm just gonna read it as they wrote it. If they didn't write it to be read that way, well, they'll live and learn. For Lenny, with namaste hands, of course. You can't overdo namaste hands, people. You can't. Honestly, just glue your hands together and walk around like that all day.
I wonder how that would play out.
All right. Context. He writes context. This is from Frater QH for Lenny. Context. In Masonry, we learned that 3 pillars of Masonry are wisdom, strength, and beauty. In hindsight, the echoes of QBL, Kabbalah, are there, but never explicitly called out as such. Later, as part of a lecture, we hear of Ionic, Dorian, and Corinthian columns. That throws me back to art history classes. Without betraying any oaths, could you possibly go into some of the symbolism involved here and what sources a brother might reach to research any other more subtle overlaps? That's the first question.
Right. And that was a very serious
and this is from a brother Mason in Canada.
Oh, well, see, now that's the thing. This is the hard part for me because the whole element of secrecy in Freemasonry is this is just something I need to mention so you get where I'm coming from with this, is it's not what people think, and that's why people constantly label Freemasonry as a secret society. I know even officially, like if you look up secret societies in an encyclopedia, oh, there will be something on Freemasonry there, absolutely. But we don't call ourselves a secret society. We say we're rather a society with secrets. And yeah, some people will quickly say, well, that's just semantics. But no, it's not to us. Because to us, a genuine secret society, of which there are several out there, right? You know it exists.
Yeah.
And at best, you may know its name. But that's as far as it goes. You don't know the names of the members. You don't know where they meet. You don't know what they do, what they learn. You basically know nothing. That's a genuine secret society. So if we were to fall into that category, we do a pretty terrible job at it. I mean, as you pointed out, you know, we wear rings. A lot of us here in Scotland, we're like prolific ring wearers here. Most Freemasons here wear rings.
Over here, it's painted all over cancer cars that drive cancer patients around. It's well known. Like my lodge is got had until they just rezoned it and forced them out. Thanks, City. Right. I had a huge skyscraper in the middle of the downtown. That was my Grand Lodge, my Trinity Lodge.
Right, we're pretty easy to find, right? And all the lodges will have big fat letters saying lodge such and such number, this and that, and have Masonic symbols in the windows and on the door and whatnot. We're not very good at hiding, and we have websites and all kinds of stuff.
Dude, if we were hidden, we just had 3 of our lodges burnt to the ground in Vancouver by a Mason. He went around to all 3 and burnt 3 to the ground, including the one in North Van where I'm from that had all the archives of Frater Achad.
No.
Yeah, and people were standing outside as they were burning, like yelling, "Free the children." Horrific, eh? Yeah. So definitely not a secret. People don't realize that actually you don't need to have ancestry to join or have some grand poobah invite you. You can just apply to join, go to the dinners, meet them. A lot of the people there are very nice. Right.
And that's been one of the biggest issues that Freemasonry has experienced as well, is that we've actually had people in the past whose fathers or grandfathers or uncles were Freemasons, and the boys in question, sons, grandsons, whatever, became intrigued by it and kept wondering, I wonder when dad is going to invite me to come along, or when my uncle's going to invite me to come along, and it just never happened. And then people lose out on it, thinking they need to be invited, because it is true when you hear that thing about you need to be invited. You can't just show up and sign a form and pay your dues and off you go, right? You do need an invitation, but that invitation, it doesn't mean that has to be given unrequested. You actually have to take the first step, and that's the thing, because we are not allowed to push anyone else to become a Freemason. That's a big question that you will be given when you go in for your inquiry meeting, is that you are coming of your own free will. Yeah. And that's the reason why we're very adamant about it's okay. We can talk a whole bunch about Masonry. Most of us, we love talking about Freemasonry, right? We love it, and we're only happy to answer questions. But we can't suggest and say, I think you should join. I think you should apply. We can't really do that, because that would be considered us sort of pressuring someone else, even if it's, it's with good intentions and you're not pushing anyone. You're saying, but it's still your decision. But we're still very adamant about, shouldn't do that. Answer people's questions and then let them make the decision themselves. But they have to take that very first step and actually contact a lodge and show an interest. And that's when you will then receive an invitation, if you turn out to be someone that the lodge believes you would be an ideal candidate for the order, and the order would be good for you as well. And then you will receive the invitation to come in on this and that night to this and that lodge for your initiation. So that's what that invitation means. It's not in the same sense as certain other orders. Some are also Masonically related, are by invitation only, but that's in a very literal sense, that you can't apply. You need to know someone who's already inside and who thinks, I think brother such and such would be good for this or that order. And so he will recommend you to that order, and then they will, suddenly you will just get a letter and you're like, who the hell is this from? And then you will get your invitation, right? But that's not how Freemasonry works. You have to make the first step. And that's why you get that famous bumper sticker thing, to be one, ask one, right?
Yeah.
That's where that
sense.
comes from, because you just ask someone,
Yeah.
and then you start your journey from there. But I digress. It was the whole thing about the pillars and so on. That's the thing about secrecy. There's a lot of stuff we can talk about in Freemasonry. It's actually most of it we can talk about, and very few things we can't. There are some very specific secrets in Freemasonry, and those are the things that we swear to never reveal, right? But outside of that, a lot of the other stuff is not secret. When it comes to the rituals, to the degree rituals, it's a little all over the place with how people feel. Some people feel as long as you keep the actual secrets, with capital letters, secret, well, you can talk about the other stuff. And other people, myself included, are a bit more, I don't like talking about the details of the rituals. Both, for one, you don't want to ruin the surprise, as it were, for any potential Freemason, because the less you know, the more awe-inspiring it is when you're there and you're like, wow, because you have no idea what you're getting yourself into, basically, right? Ritually speaking. And if you know what to expect, you're not really paying attention, and you're like, oh yeah, I read about that, I heard about that, and it doesn't have the same impact, right? So that's one. But the other thing is also, we tend to feel, many of us at least, obviously I can't speak for everyone, but many of us tend to feel that there are certain things about Freemasonry, about the symbolism and the teachings, and especially the rituals, that should be for Freemasons only, because it's a private thing, it's a private order. And so we tend to think, well, what do you need to know it for? If you're not a Freemason and you don't intend to become one, why do you need to know? Because some people will quickly say, well, I'm not planning on becoming a Freemason, so you can tell me. Or someone will say, but I'm a girl, I can't become a Freemason, so you can tell me. And then, well, why do you need to know then? Then it has nothing to do with you. And so because of that, I know that sounds kind of snobby, but it's not so much being snobby as just being protective of what we feel. This is our private little thing. And it's something very important to us, and we don't want to belittle that. And so because of that, some of us are a little adamant about, we don't want to talk about ritual details. And the thing with the pillars, I would kind of prefer to not, because then we would go into a lot of analysis with the symbolism of the pillars and what they point to, morally and ethically speaking, in terms of the principles and philosophies of Freemasonry. Well, what I could do, there's a little bit of additional information, if I remember correctly, in, I always forget the title of that book because it's pretty long. It's a book on the tracing boards.
Maybe
I will give you the link, and you can put the link in where, if you put this podcast video up on YouTube, you can put the link down there or something. I'll give you an Amazon link or something to that book. But there are some extra details, if I remember correctly. There's some extra details in there about the pillars and the significance of them and so on. But I would prefer to kind of
maybe
steer around it, if you don't mind.
Maybe one day in the future we could even do an unrecorded special little chat with you and any Masonic listeners of the podcast who are who are Masons, and talk about that stuff. That could be a fun thing to do with just Masons. And it's worth noting also for female listeners, you can be a woman and join Masonry. I thought that was a most purely modern thing, but I got an earful from Geraldine at Atlantis Books a couple of years ago about the history of women Masons in Masonry. And so I no longer say what I used to say, that it's just, I got schooled and I was fascinated at talk, message Geraldine or do some research if you are a woman who wants to become a Mason. I'm sure that there's lots of pathways.
Well, that's the thing, though. That depends on where you look.
Sure. All right, next question.
No, it's just because, here in Scotland, it's still, there's no such thing as female Freemasonry in Scotland. There's no such thing.
Not in Scotland.
Because it's one of the oldest rules, if you will, in Masonry, is that women cannot be made Masons. And because of that, with all due respect to other orders and other organizations of different kinds, that such as women's Freemasonry and co-masonry and so on, they are what we refer to as, I know people are not going to like when I use that word because it's usually given like a negative connotation. That's not the case though. It's but when we call it irregular Freemasonry, right? Well, what we call irregular Freemasonry is basically what the three oldest Masonic constitutions, the Scottish, the English, and the Irish, those three original Masonic constitutions, what they recognize as official, like true and proper Freemasonry, what we call good and wholesome Freemasonry, is what is then called regular Freemasonry. And anything that doesn't abide by the old rules and the old laws will be considered by these three Masonic constitutions as irregular Freemasonry. And then any other constitution that has derived from either the Scottish, the English, or the Irish. Like, for example, the US has its own Masonic constitutions. Each state has its own Grand Lodge, but they all originally also came from the British Isles, of course.
That leads really well to the next question. Maybe let the question guide us. European Masonry juxtaposed with American Masonry. Are there any major differences in approach worth discussing? Particularly, I'm interested in how the European lodges approach mentorship after the Blue Lodge degrees, and whether, for example, there is anything that should be considered before applying for tuition in the SR or HRA, SR first, etc. I don't really know what that means because I just did one degree.
Right. Well, it kind of depends on what you're looking at. If you talk about European Freemasonry, because that's sort of a gray area, because are you talking regular Freemasonry or are you talking these other things that sprung out in Europe, such as the Memphis Misraim, which is considered irregular Freemasonry? It's a very popular thing in Europe. It's a very esoterically oriented form of Freemasonry, but it's considered irregular because they don't abide by these old laws and the old constitutions, and they do things too differently for the old Masonic constitutions to be able to accept them, basically. And
I'm quite curious about Memphis Misraim because of my love of Rudolf Steiner, of course.
Right.
What can people know about Steiner, Memphis Misraim, and that whole stuff? What's the most interesting stuff for people who don't even know what we're talking about to know about that? If you were telling it to a completely noob.
Well, I'm probably not the best person to ask because of my being involved in regular Freemasonry, and so most of my knowledge of Memphis Misraim is like secondhand stuff and just having read a little bit about it, and so kind of knowing what it's about, but it's never anything I have gotten involved in. And so, yeah, there would be other people who would be much better suited to answer that question. Ideally, someone who's actually in the Memphis Misraim, or at least has been, or has friends who are. I actually think I do have a couple of friends who are in Memphis Misraim, but as far as, we've just never really talked about it. And I think it's because they know that I'm a regular Freemason. And if they're in Memphis Misraim, they're like, well, you know, they're different then. And so that's why we've never really discussed Freemasonry in general. So, but yeah, I actually think I know two people who are in the Memphis Misraim.
If you can ever think of someone who'd want to talk about it on the podcast, I'd love to learn more about it myself, and especially if they understand its role in Steiner's life and tradition. That's interesting. I think the question here is mainly expressing curiosity about the major differences in just approach of North America versus Europe in general. Because people in North America don't often know Europe as well as you or I do.
Right.
I mean, hence the question, framing it all as one thing, right? That shows you right there. It's like people over here often think of it as just Europe. I mean, because let's face it, most of Europe can fit in just one little province of Canada.
Right. But even that is I mean, even within Europe, it has its own differences too. I mean, that's the thing people need to know about Freemasonry as well. As Freemasonry is Freemasonry. It is one big international order. It's the same order. It's governed by different Masonic constitutions. The different Masonic constitutions, the different Grand Lodges, they don't answer to each other. So like the Scottish Masonic Constitution and the Grand Lodge of Scotland does not answer to, say, the UGLE, the United Grand Lodge of England, and they don't answer to us. And we don't answer to the Irish Grand Lodge, and so on. We don't answer to each other. As long as we're all recognized as practicing regular Freemasonry, we govern our own constitutions, and you do you, I do me, basically, like that. So we don't answer to each other. We work together, and because we are an international order, which is also why you can visit any lodge in the world, and you will always be open. You will always be welcomed with open arms.
Well, I was told when I joined Trinity Lodge here in Vancouver back in 2005. No, 2004, right after I closed Temple to Hootie and got divorced. When you lose a wife, become a Mason. No, but they did say that technically I'd be welcomed over in England and Europe, but they said I might actually have some trouble getting into the lodges, especially without a letter of introduction, unless someone actually knew me personally. So it's not total open arms.
When you go through the right channels, then yes, then that is total open arms if you go through the right channels. But that's the thing, it's to protect the Masonic Constitution, right? And to protect the different Grand Lodges and the constitutions that they govern. That's why we have this little bit of red tape we do. Unless you know someone there, then you send a letter, or nowadays you can just send an email. You send an email to your lodge secretary or your provincial Grand Lodge secretary, and he will pass it on to the Grand Lodge secretary about the lodge you would like to visit, and then he will contact the Grand Secretary of that Grand Lodge in that country, and then they will contact the lodge you want to visit to make sure, first of all, they check that it's actually one that's on their list, so to speak. It's not a clandestine lodge, as they call it in the US, an irregular lodge, so it's not regular Freemasonry that's being practiced. So the Grand Lodge makes sure it's actually one of their lodges, and then they will contact the lodge and let them know there's a guy from this or that country who would love to go visit, and then they get the confirmation back, and then back along that same line it goes, and you will get your confirmation, you're welcome to go visit. Then you don't have to do anything. You usually don't have to be tested or anything. There are some lodges that have traditions that you always test someone who's not from that lodge. And many other lodges are like, no, as long as we know the guy, or he has that letter of introduction via the Grand Lodge, then no problem, we just welcome him. That's how it was when I went to Denmark recently for Christmas and New Year's. I visited a lodge in Denmark, and I went through that proper chain of command, so to speak, and I didn't get tested or anything, and I was welcomed with open arms by everyone there, and it was just, just fantastic. But yeah, if people don't know you and you don't go through that process, it can cause problems, because then they're like, well, who is this guy? And we haven't heard anything about him, and he's just showing up. And then some lodges will test you, and if you pass the tests, they will let you in. But other lodges will, they might not even let you in, even if they could test you, simply because you have this random guy. And well, what if he happens to be so lucky that he has read some stuff online and he would be able to kind of pass a test, but he's faking it, So it depends on the given lodge and the given place. But technically, like I said, it is a big international order. It is all the same thing, but it does have some differences in the different constitutions, because of, we do things slightly our own way. And that's something we can get into in a few minutes too. But in terms of in Europe, for example, in Denmark and Sweden, and I believe in Norway too, they actually have two different types of Masonic systems, but they're both regular Freemasonry. They mainly follow the English Constitution and the Swedish Rite, as it's called. You can't think of it in terms of like the Scottish Rite and stuff like that. That's a whole different kettle of fish.
Is it true that there's not a 32nd degree in Europe, in the Scot?
Oh, there is, but
I've heard something about there only being 30 and the 32nd degree is an American thing. I did hear that while I was in the States.
No. You still have that. I mean, because you still have the ancient and accepted rite, or it's called the ancient and accepted Scottish rite in the US, but we don't really call it that here because it seems kind of weird to call it the Scottish rite when it was invented by the French and it has nothing to do with Scotland and nothing to do with Scottish Freemasonry.
Oh,
that's another common misconception. Many people think Scottish rite, oh, right. As soon as you mention Scottish Freemasonry, I noticed that I think it was when you interviewed, I think it was Rufus Opus, and you mentioned something about that, about Scottish Freemasonry, and he asked if it had something to do with Scottish Rite, and you told no, that's a whole separate thing, and it is actually, because the Scottish Rite,
by accident.
Yes.
Trust your intuition, people. Even if you don't know the answer, just start talking. Just start talking, and sometimes you'll be right. This is how I get through life.
No, but that was actually very true, because the Scottish Rite is a separate thing. It's still a Masonic order, but it's not what we call craft Freemasonry or Blue Lodge Freemasonry. Here in Scotland, we usually nickname it the Blues. The Blues. Right?
I need to get more of the blues. I need to finish my blues. I need to finish the blues.
But that's the heart and soul of Freemasonry. That's Freemasonry with capital letters. And that's why any Freemason worth his salt, if you ask him what's the highest degree in Freemasonry, we will all answer the same thing. We'll say the 3rd degree.
Yeah.
We will not talk about that 32nd degree or the 33rd degree and all that other stuff. That is tremendously popular. And now I'm bringing it back to this difference between the States and in Europe, right? That is tremendously popular in the US. It seems like, that's my impression at least. I can't speak for people individually, but that's been my impression from when I've heard a lot of interviews and a lot of podcasts Freemasons from the States have done. It sounds a lot like many people sort of kind of just want to get the 3 degrees of Freemasonry proper, core Freemasonry, what we call the blues. They kind of just want to get that over and done with as quickly as possible so they can get into the Scottish Rite. Because the Scottish Rite is a separate Masonic body, a separate Masonic order that has degrees after that, like 4th degree, 5th, and so on, up to and including the 33rd degree. But the issue is, it is not under craft Freemasonry. It's a separate entity. And because of that, you will have Grand Lodges, like the Grand Lodge of Scotland states very specifically that we are not involved in any Masonic degrees other than the entered apprentice, the fellow of craft, and by extension, the mark degree, and the master mason degree. That's it. There is nothing else called Freemasonry other than those 3 degrees. That's it. Everything after that are other Masonic degrees or Masonic bodies or Masonic orders. So they're all, yes, they are Masonic, but it's not Freemasonry proper. It's a separate thing. So the Knights Templar, it's a separate thing, which is why we say you can't say that if you have, like, for example, the 18th Rose Quad degree or something in the Scottish Rite, then you are higher ranking, so to speak, than someone who has a lower degree in something else, in the York Rite, for example, because they're completely separate things. And the one thing both of these Masons have in common is they're both 3rd degree Master Masons.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the only thing, is when you become a Master Mason, all of these other things open up, like the Royal Arch, etc.
It's a really fascinating way to integrate a kind of egalitarian brotherhood within a hierarchical structure. It's interesting to see those 2 things paired together so that they work to sort of be almost a white and black extremes, the structure in which someone's 32nd degree and someone might be 5th degree, but then on the other pillar, we're all one.
Yeah, exactly. They're exactly the same.
Force and form.
Master Masons.
Yeah.
It's the same as saying, if you have such and such a level in a martial art, let's say you have a 2nd degree black belt in Kyokushin Karate, and someone else has a kohada mahon, a brown kohada, a brown belt in a certain Capoeira group. Oh, then this guy is higher ranking than that guy. you can't really say that because they're two completely different things. They're both martial arts, but they are two completely different things within that martial art world. And it's the same here. These two different things, it's still within the world of Freemasonry, but one is, for example, Knights Templar, the other is Scottish Rite, and all this other stuff, right?
Yeah.
So you can only compare those degrees for people who want to compare degrees
I love
within that given system itself. That's it. You can't look outside of it. So that's why the whole thing about this 32nd degree, 33rd degree, and being this high and mighty and so on, we still have, like I said, we do have those degrees in Scotland, but it's a very, very different beast over here than what it is in North America. It's not like this massively popular thing. The main thing in Scotland is craft Freemasonry, and then I would say the other two things that are very, very big after that would be Royal Arch and Knights Templar, and then Cryptic Council.
Yeah.
Also, but
I like that you did a little martial arts comparison there, which is good. We'll do a segment later on getting into martial arts. Though you should have used real examples of different traditions and degrees. Like I'm like 3rd Q Bujinkan, and you're what in Bujinkan?
I have Rokudan, 6th degree black belt.
So we'll get there. But last night I was talking to a listener, and sometimes I just talk to people on Instagram and it turns into a call, and he was asking a lot about, like, it throws back to the quote I opened up with from Yeats about adeptship. He was asking, what is that stuff? I'm like, look, I said to him, you need to stop worrying and thinking that that has some sort of ontological value and some totalizing effect in a person's life. Like, just because you have expertise in a thing doesn't mean it applies to some other field, right? You can be adept in this system, you'd be a 3rd degree Wiccan, it doesn't mean you're a 3rd degree Mason, right? These terms generally, an accomplishment, they don't speak to anything to do with the value of the human soul or how how accomplished it is. And you see that really well reflected in the ethos of the Master Mason fraternity, where you guys, once you go through the basic 3 degrees, you're all equal, right? Right. Yeah.
But
and that's something that I think this
even prior
even prior, actually, that's what I was told right after my initiation. Like, you are a full Mason, you can't come to the meetings until you've done your 3rd degree, which was fine, but you are a full brother. I'm like, what, even if I vanish and never come back, which incidentally I did.
In Canada, you can't attend meetings until you become a Master Mason?
Yeah, that's what they told me. So I didn't.
Okay.
So after my first initiation, after my fellow craft, that's the 1st degree, right?
No, that's the 2nd degree.
Okay, what's the first one?
1st degree is entered apprentice.
Right, so they gave me a binder, and then I had no contact with anyone for like 8 months. So I just I was like, and having just shut down a Golden Dawn temple as its imperator, it was lacking. That was lacking in content for me. I needed more to be pulled into something than here's a ceremony, and here, and let's drink scotch for a while and toast the queen 20-30 times, and we'll see you in 8 months maybe. And
that's too bad.
It was really too bad. It's not as bad as the deception they played on me during the initiation. That was the real reason I just never went back. But I wanted to join that lodge because it was the lodge that my great grandfather had been a member of, and there was no males in our line until me. After that, I was the first male born in that family line. He was from Scotland, part of the Hay clan, a sept of the Stewart clan. And my great grandma was Emily Hay, and they were from the Highlands of Scotland, and I really want, and so I got his little Masonic pin when my grandma died. Anyway, I wanted to the thing they deceived me on. They didn't. It wasn't that I need my hand held, especially coming out of what I was in seminary.
No, but you want to get involved, right? You want to get involved in
I wasn't even allowed to go see the library. It was just like there was no substance there. And given how much substance I had in my life I was doing my MDiv in theological college, right, and had just closed down a GD temple, so I was still working with magicians who wanted to work with me, of course, especially my close friends. You don't stop doing magic just because there's a schism in your order or whatever, I mean, well, some people do, but that's then what you've suspected all along about those people, of course.
Right.
But the deception was they told me they were concerned before admitting me into Masonry because of my strong Irish and Celtic identity. And they were concerned about that. And I said, well, why would you be concerned? Because it's not like why would that be an issue? They're like, well, it shouldn't be, but we thought it might be. I'm like, well, there's no swearing to the British crown in the Masonry, right? There's no explicit God save the Queen stuff, is there? And they're like, no. And then during the initiation, right there, they're like, now take this vow on the British flag. And I was like, what? The one thing I did not want to do is take an oath on a British flag on an altar. But I was hoodwinked, and I not literally, but also, and I just felt so betrayed. And coming out of what a lot of people know I just came out of with, Zinky Poo and all that shit. The last thing I was hypersensitive to any shenanigans whatsoever. So I was a raw nerve, and like, what is this? I went through it with gritted teeth, and that sucked. And then afterwards, it was toasting the Queen all night, toasting the Queen, a big portrait of the Queen in the common room where we were drinking scotch and getting to know each other and toasting the Queen. I was like, this is my nightmare. This is my literal nightmare, because I just identified with my Irish and Scottish heritage, and my English family were often quite harsh with me because of my Irish roots, and I didn't identify with them. I didn't respect them in many ways because of how they treated me. Like, oh, you like Ireland? Well, they're all murderers and thieves. I heard that shit from my family in Rotherham, in Yorkshire, and so I was rightfully not wanting to take an oath on a British flag. And then afterwards, I talked to my buddy who sort of helped me get into Masonry, who ran the Celtic butcher shop in town. He was, third top dog Mason in the parade leader for the city and all that. He heard that and he was furious. He's like, why didn't they send you to an Irish craft lodge? I talked to my buddy Yosef. He was like, yeah, that is fucked up. What the fuck? And I was like, yeah, it sucks. And I didn't even know how much it sucked at the time till afterwards. I was like, wow, I could have had an experience that really pulled me in there if they had treated me with any amount of care. So that's my story. We're doing a whole hour on Masonry, so I may as well get it all out there so people know. And I'm sure my story will help people navigate Masonry correctly, because I think done well, it brings so much to your life. I mean, making good men better is what we need more than ever these days.
Oh, absolutely. That's also why I feel that whenever I hear that, where people say Freemasonry, but that's like an old-fashioned, outdated thing, I personally feel Freemasonry is even more relevant today than it ever has been in the past, because of people being as self-centered as they tend to be nowadays, as materialistic as people are. I feel something like that actually teaches you how to think about someone else other than just yourself, and how to care for your fellow man, and wanting to help someone else, and always having that idea that, don't worry, however bad it gets, there will always be someone out there who's worse off than you. And so whenever you do have the opportunity to help someone, well, why wouldn't you? Even if it's just buying someone on the street a sandwich and a hot cup of coffee to keep them warm and sitting out there and it's cold, but helping someone else wherever you can, right? I mean, I think something like that is tremendously important nowadays. But I want to quickly circle back to the thing you mentioned about how you felt like you were kind of cut off in your lodge, not cut off per se, well, kind of in a sense that, okay, now that's it, so now we'll maybe see you in 8 months. That's I've never heard that before. That's quite interesting. Here in Scotland, as soon as you're initiated, you have the right to attend each and every meeting in your mother lodge, and you can go on visitations too. The only thing, of course, you can't do is you can't stay in the lodge temple. You can't stay in the lodge hall during a ritual that is anything other than the entered apprentice degree.
Yeah.
obviously.
Obviously.
And so some people, they choose to then just not show up for a meeting if they know it's going to be a second or a third degree, because they know they will only be able to be there for the quote unquote business part, and then they get chucked out and they can sit outside and wait for an hour and a half, and then later they can sit and have a few drinks and a snack and a wee blether with their brethren.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, here in Scotland, you, as soon as you're initiated, you can attend every single meeting there is and go on visitations. It's just certain things you can't be there for, of course, until you become a master mason. And then it's sort of like everything opens up to you, with the exception of, well, here in Scotland, two particular things.
Yeah.
One is, of course, a certain part of the installation ritual or the installation ceremony. But that goes for everyone. There will be a certain part where the master of the lodge is being installed. And then anyone who is not presently a master of a lodge or a past master, they get chucked out because they can't be there for that part, because that's for masters only, right? And then they all get let in afterwards, after that. But then in addition to that, here in Scotland, we have what we call the mark degree. Well, the mark exists in other Masonic constitutions too, but it works a little differently. Here in Scotland, the mark degree, it's often called a degree, right? And so some people mistakenly think it's a fourth degree, but it's not. There's no such thing. It's considered an extension of the second degree, the fellow craft degree. But here in Scotland, you don't get it until after you become a master mason. And after you have received your mark degree, only then can you join what's known as the Royal Arch. So that's one particular thing where, you know, as it usually goes, when you become a master mason, all the doors open up. But there are some restrictions, such as, like I said, the Royal Arch. You need that mark degree first before you can enter the Royal Arch. And then after that, you know, on to all the other stuff. If you're interested, some people are only interested in the blues, and so they stay with that for the rest of their lives. And other people eventually get interested in the Royal Arch, and then they get interested in the Cryptic Council, and they get interested in the Knights Templar, and so on, right? So, sorry, your mic
sorry,
is muted.
What does HRA and SR stand for?
What did you say? One more time, please.
What do the initials HRA and SR?
I assume when it's HRA and you said SR. Wait, yeah, because I don't want to say anything I'm not supposed to say. It was just something else that popped up in my head. Let me just write it down so I can see it.
Well, here, I got another specific question while you're contemplating that. Let that percolate in the Gilgalim of your soul. Junior Deacon in Scotland, do they have the JD circumambulate and challenge anyone that isn't a member of the lodge before tiling and before opening?
Now, see, that's the thing. That's one thing that makes Scottish Freemasonry unique. You can't say what we do generally and what we don't do, because here in Scotland, I'll try to keep this as brief as possible, but we have to look a little bit at Masonic history again in order to understand it. The creation of the Grand Lodge in England in 1717, right? The very first Grand Lodge. Like I mentioned earlier, that's true. The first Grand Lodge was founded in England. Like I said, the oldest Masonic written records in the world are Scottish, but the oldest Grand Lodge is English. Absolutely. Okay. The second oldest is the Irish. Ironically, the youngest of the three is the Scottish one. It wasn't founded until 1736. But if you understand Masonic history and Scottish mentality, it makes a lot more sense. Because people will then say, well, that's kind of ironic. Why would, if Scotland is where Freemasonry started, why would they be the last among the three to actually come up with a Grand Lodge? Well, because in England, like I said, it was 4 lodges that already existed in England that came together, decided to create this Grand Lodge system, right? So it was an easy enough thing. It was kind of like easy peasy. Yeah, off we go. And then in Ireland, they wanted to emulate that because they saw that looks good. It works really well. Let's do that. And so they wanted to do the same thing. And in Scotland, of course, you had some Freemasons who then had that same idea. Aha, that looks like a good idea. We should do the same thing here. But here's the problem. You then have lodges in Scotland that have existed for over 100 years prior to this idea for a Grand Lodge popping up, this Grand Lodge system, for at least 100, maybe at least 150 years. And then suddenly you have people who want to establish this Grand Lodge who's now going to tell everyone what to do and what not to do. And then, of course, you have a lot of these lodges who would then, you can imagine it would go something along the lines of,
well, if you're just a lodge and they're a grand lodge, you have to listen to them because they're grand.
See, that's the thing, right? Then
See,
you have
I know stuff.
It doesn't quite fly like that when you have a lodge who will say that, wait a minute, we've been around for over 100 years. And suddenly they're going to tell us how to practice the craft. If anyone should be telling anyone how to do it, we should be telling them, right?
But
because
can't
we've
I
been
just
around
say,
for so and so long.
Can't I just say I am the grand adept and all my magic always works and all magicians should listen to me? Like, that's the way. This is the way. This is the way.
Absolutely. And it never works.
Cool. Okay, well,
However
cool.
much people would like to make it work like that. But see, so then the issue was, well, in part that, right? You would have people who would not want to change what they were doing because they felt, well, we know what we're doing. We've been doing it for so and so long. We're not going to want to compromise that by people then telling us, now you can't do it like this and that, you have to do like such and such. And we're going to have to give up traditions we've had for a century. Forget about it. And then other lodges that were still mainly operative would be like, oh, wow, okay, great. So this Grand Lodge thing sounds interesting. All right, so what are you going to do are you going to help us get more work? Are you going to distribute the different jobs we get and so on? And then the Grand Lodge was like, no, we're purely a speculative body. Huh, well, then what do we need you for? And they leave. Because it's like, well, we can't use that for anything. So that was the problem that Grand Lodge had. I know I'm kind of making it sort of crude and rough right here, but that's the basic gist of how it went. And because of that, the Grand Lodge of Scotland had to compromise a lot in order to implement the Grand Lodge system. Just look at it like this. 100 lodges were invited to Edinburgh in 1736, when they wanted to establish the Grand Lodge. And out of all these, around 30 showed up. I think the exact number was 33 representatives of those lodges showed up. Representatives of 33 out of 100. That's not a whole lot, right? And the rest of them were just, we're not wasting our time with that. And out of that number, there were several that left. And it seems that they were mainly the operative lodges who then found out this Grand Lodge thing is not going to do anything for us in terms of work. So what do we care? And they left. And then you had whatever was left who then agreed that it was a good idea, but you had to get everyone on board. And so the issue is that the Grand Lodge had to compromise a lot by then making certain rules where they would say, we will not interfere in your day-to-day activities as long as we can agree on such and such and such. And it actually took time to get everyone on board. It was not until the 19th century where the last lodge finally eventually went along with it and signed on to the whole Grand Lodge thing, so that the Grand Lodge would be like the governing body of Freemasonry in Scotland. But it's like we say, the Grand Lodge in some countries sort of tells people what to do and what not to do, and that's it. There's no arguing with it. Yeah. In Scotland, it's very different. If the Grand Lodge sends out a letter about a certain something they would like to do, it sounds more like a kind of request. Well, we think it might be a good idea if the Scottish craft decides to do like such and such, and we of course hope the brethren of our daughter lodges will agree. And then it's kind of up to the lodges to agree or not. As long as it's not something that falls under the laws and constitutions, then of course that's something everyone has agreed to abide by. But if it's outside of that, it's kind of like a suggestion, but you choose what to do. That's why here in Scotland, no one lodge operates exactly the same as another. It's not, if you go to England and you see a first degree ritual, one lodge, you will have seen all of them because they all do the same thing. They all do the same ritual. They all wear the same regalia. Here in Scotland, you go to a lodge, you will see all colors of the rainbow if they have a lot of visitors, because each lodge chooses their own regalia colors. And there, of course, there are certain
That's very
rules.
cool.
It's very cool. I mean, we love it here. We think that always makes it interesting to visit other lodges. Also, you will notice that you can go to 5 different lodges that all do a first degree ritual, and you can see 5 different first degree rituals. They will all still be the same, like they will have the same core components, of course. All the core material is still the same. Obviously, they can't just do whatever the hell they want. It still has to be, there are certain elements that need to be preserved in the rituals. There are certain elements in terms of regalia and how a lodge operates that need to be maintained. But everything outside of that is sort of, you decide. And that's why it'll be so different over here. So you can see 5 significantly different versions of the first degree ritual. You will recognize a lot of things, but you'll be like, wow, that is so different to how we do things. And it's fascinating. It makes sure it's never boring here in Scotland, visiting lodges. It's never boring.
Scotland is not boring in general, I found.
Oh, definitely
I
not.
literally can't wait to visit, especially since you guys have ended and defeated COVID UK-wide. From the sounds of it.
I don't know about that, but we're working on it.
Well, I'm just going based off what I saw. I watched Boris Johnson and like basically
Mhm.
and end everything and say, yeah, look, we're done. We're getting back to normal and opening up entirely. And that's just good news. I just like celebrating. People get mad when I like try and like when I hear something good, I'm like, hey, I think this might be real. Let's all be happy. And people are like, rah, no. It's like, come on, come on. I don't mind a good healthy debate, but like, let's not like egg this thing on more than it needs to be. Let's be realistic here. So yeah, Scott, I can't wait to get back to visit family in the UK, of course, and yeah, see Scotland, see you again. It's been so long.
It's been many years.
If anyone's
great to have you come visit.
Yeah, well, it will guaranteed happen. Yeah, there's a lot of I have a lot of good Celtic musician friends in Edinburgh who I've always been promising, because when I lived in Belfast, and when I was I was actually doing research there for a PhD guy in the Belfast Public Archives, and my job was to read 17th and 18th century minute books from meetings, like because I beat all of the other candidates out for the research job because of my specialty in reading that period of handwriting. I was doing my doctorate on Evelyn Underhill, so I had some facility with reading manuscripts, and so I was sitting there going through the 17th century minute meetings of publicans, of Irish publicans, for this blind PhD, and telling him what they said so he could make notes for his postdoc research. And it's just a little ferry over from Belfast to Scotland, which a lot of people don't realize. You can just take a little ferry over. You can put your car on it even, and it's really amazing. So yeah, look forward to seeing the Celtic countries again, brother. Yeah, have a wee nippy sweetie with you. You know that expression, nippy sweetie?
Not nippy sweetie. No.
It might be a Belfast one for a wee dram. We'd be driving around the hill country in Northern Ireland, and Glenn would be like, "Should we have a wee nippy sweetie?" I'm like, "Oh, I think so." You'd be like, "I think so." We go in and get a tall one and a short one. Oh yeah, of course, one turns into 3, and then we have to let the gymnast drive, who's sober, and Irish sober. He's Irish sober.
Right.
That's like, let's not ask what that
Irish
is.
sober.
Let's not even get into what that might mean. Okay, so there's a little bit more Freemasonry to talk about. We've done a good over an hour, I think, on Masonry, which I'm impressed that I was able to do, given my supreme lack of knowledge about it, actually. But one thing, a myth worth dispelling for people who are considering Masonry, is there's always that myth out there that it's just a way for people to make business deals and get rich. And I was very surprised after the initiation, before the toasts and drinking started, and they had us each take turns standing up in the social room. And they said, here's your chance to tell us about yourself, and this is also your only chance to speak about whatever your business is in life, because we will not discuss business ever again here. Your personal business or any of that has no place here. You cannot talk about it, except for right now. Say whatever you want. One of the guys actually did a pitch. He was like, okay, and he pitched them, and everyone thought it was hilarious, right? Because like, hey, you said this is the one chance. You wouldn't actually be a very good businessman if you didn't take your one chance in front of a group of people to actually pitch them. So he did. And if Masons want to go do business on their own personal time, I'm sure that's fine. But so there's, you know, there's obviously benefits to friendships, but that has nothing to do with Masonry. That's just what friendship is about.
Exactly.
You know,
Right.
you and me have
Exactly.
talked about working together a bit, and I hope we do sometime. And that sort of brings us to Occult book publishing and your new release of Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft, which is going to be so exciting. And there's a couple questions about how to get into book publishing from people here, because some of these listeners have your books. You put out, you don't mind if I talk about the books you put out, do you?
No. Feel free.
So obviously some of my students and friends have your Pat Zaleski books, which are best ordered directly from you if people want to get the beautiful editions you've done of Pat Zaleski's Egyptian God Forms book and his Enochian book. The way to do that is to email you and request an invoice, correct? Because on Amazon, they're listed as $100, but that's not the real price.
No. They're crazy expensive on Amazon. I know it sounds kind of shady saying it like this, but that's actually the only reason why I made the books available on Amazon, was for promotional purposes, you know, so people know they exist, because people look stuff up on Amazon. But I always tell people, by all means, you know, get them from us directly. Don't get them on Amazon, because they're way too expensive, simply because it's a very, very small business and the fees that you have to pay on Amazon, and because of the costs of producing these books, because it is such a small business, all the books they're not done through lithographic printing. They're not offset printed, so they're digitally printed, and so they're done POD. It's print on demand, because you know, we just don't have the space to stockpile thousands and thousands of books. And so it's just the easiest way to go about it when you're a small business, but it is not the most financially viable way to do it, because it's insanely expensive compared to lithographic printing. And so because of that, if we were to sell them at the regular price on Amazon, the fees after we've paid those, and after we abide by Amazon's regulations for like minimum shipping and stuff like that, it would end up basically costing money for some of the titles, and others you would end up making maybe $2 per book or something like that. And then some of the other books are so incredibly expensive to produce that you actually end up losing money if you do it like that. So we have to make up for that loss, and because of that, the books are insanely expensive there. But we still have people who try to buy them there, but whenever they get in touch with us, I always say, please, by all means, contact us directly. You used to be able to buy the books directly through the website, but then we had to change web hosts and this and that, and then COVID happened, and we had to focus our time elsewhere. And so I just decided, okay, we'll just leave the website for now, because people started getting comfortable with this whole pay through PayPal. They get an invoice, they pay the PayPal invoice, and we send out the books. It's basically the same as when you buy them through a website, except you don't have a website as a mediator. You just send all the information directly instead of through the site. So we kept doing that for a while, and so that's what people can still do. But the new website is still coming up, and then it'll go back to the old format of you can just dump stuff in a shopping cart, and then, you know, off you go.
And the email to message you in case people want to get the Zaleski Enochian book or Godform book or any of your other books, what is that email?
That email is hermetic-science@hotmail.com.
Wonderful. That's a Hotmail. That's an up and coming new service, right?
Right. Hey man, if it ain't broke, don't try to fix it.
So Brother Mason has asked, do you have any new books coming up? And of course, we all know the answer to that. And it is Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft. Please tell and show us whatever you can about this stunning and brave new project of yours.
Well, first of all, it's more specific than just Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft, which is what makes it special. The book is actually entitled The Grimoire of Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft, because the thing is, Reginald Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft, originally published in England in 1584, was a book that it was sort of his way of lashing out a bit at the Catholic Church for superstitious practices, for just an unfair treatment of people that were either just what he considered just con artists, idiots, or mentally challenged individuals, basically. And he felt that a lot of these people were being prosecuted as witches. And a lot of it was just because of superstitious mumbo jumbo, that's not in his own words, I'm paraphrasing here, but that's basically how he would put it. He would use a lot of derogatory terminology towards people who believed in superstitious practices of different kinds, or people who claimed to be magicians and conjurers and so on. Sorry about that. He would use a lot of derogatory terminology to make them sound as con artists, basically, and people shouldn't be deceived by that. And
was that to cover his own ass, or did he actually believe that?
No, he actually did believe that. Okay. He had it seems like Scott had a kind of a strange relationship to magic in general, because he was definitely of the belief that quote unquote witchcraft, which back in those days didn't have anything to do with modern day Wicca. It wasn't a religious thing, and it wasn't a nature loving thing. Witchcraft back in those days was a term that was used in a derogatory sense when it came to magic. It was basically wicked magic. It was using magic for evil purposes. That was witchcraft, right? And I know people today don't like to hear that, but that's just a historical fact. That's how the term was used back in those days.
That term goes back to ancient Assyria. When I was in England in 2019, I went to a lecture at the British Library. I ran into actually one of the other presenters who I had met at the Berlin Occult where I was presenting in Berlin 2018. And I randomly met her outside of Geraldine's shop in London, and she invited us to a lecture of a PhD they just found a new chunk of a cuneiform tablet and reattached it to this other one, and they got something new. And what they got new was the illegality of witchcraft. Obviously, the word wasn't actually witchcraft in Assyrian, but it's the equivalent. And what it meant was magic used to hurt another person. And that's still when people, especially with all the dark fluff and LHP, left-hand path stuff these days, and this quest to redefine black magic as an entire field of study, which I don't think it is. I think magic is just one field of study. Black magic is a term traditionally we apply when someone uses the field of magic to hurt a person. Right? I don't consider black magic to be a field of study. And when left-hand path people try and describe what they see it as to me, I'm like, so-called right-hand path people, which I don't think that term, I think is a false dichotomy, of course. We do all the stuff you're describing. They're like, no, in the left-hand path, to find your inner light and to higher self, you have to go into the darkness and face these demons. So that's all of us. That's not a left-hand path thing. And they're like, really? I was sure that's what I was told it was. It's like, no. They're like, but that's what black magic is. I'm like, no, it just isn't. I mean, sure, we can redefine things however we want. Words change, meanings change, but sometimes they shouldn't.
Right.
Because how useful is it? It's like the thing with people now using the word invocation to describe summoning a spirit into your body. Okay, if you want to say that's what invocation is now, you can, but think of all the students then, whenever they read any historical magical literature, any grimoire whatsoever, any liturgy, when they see the word invocation, then they're not going to know what's being talked about.
They will misunderstand.
They will misunderstand what's being talked about. So there's the conundrum. Anyway, we got to,
No, but that, like I said about Scott, and whenever he used the term witchcraft,
he used it in the Assyrian sense.
Right. He used it in that derogatory sense. It's something, it's terrible and it's bad, it's evil, it's wicked.
And then he goes on to say how to do it exactly.
Well, that's the thing, right? Because he presented a lot of stuff in the Discovery of Witchcraft where he actually unveiled various tricks of prestidigitation, of legerdemain, sleight of hand, right? and he showed a lot of props and so on for performing that, what people today would call stage magic, right?
Yeah.
To show people that this is not real. So don't go executing and torturing people and whatnot because they do something like that and you think it's magic. And the same when it came to superstitious things. And then he put in examples of different, like what I would define as miscellaneous spells, like folk magic type practices, simpler, less ritualistic practices, such as, write a certain name on a piece of paper and then throw it in the fire and such will happen, and he would put a lot of these things in and he would say, this is just, pardon my French, but to put it bluntly, this is just superstitious crap. Right, that was basically what he said, and then we get.
I think we have different definitions of what French is, brother. But you're a father. You're a father. Everyone I know who's a new parent has a completely altered vocabulary after their kids are born.
Right, that's usually how it goes.
Pardon my French, but that's darn stupid or darn silly. It's like, what the fucking hell are you talking about, weirdo?
All right, sorry for making it weird with my
no, I love it. You actually do speak French.
Yeah.
How many languages are you at now?
Well, technically, I don't speak French because I'm terrible at actually speaking it because I only ever studied it for the purpose of being able to read it.
Right.
And so I got really good at reading French and even translating French, but not speaking it. And my ears are so untrained that when I hear people speaking French, I lose out on like 70% of what they say because it's just never what I focused on, which is something I would like to change one day in the future, because I think it's kind of dumb that I can read French, but I can't speak it. It just seems kind of stupid.
It makes sense to me. I'm Canadian. I just learned it as a Canadian. I just learned enough French to get out of class. Puis je l'ai aux toilettes. Will you come right back? Ouais. The Canadian.
No, so you can't include French on my list. So no,
but English is even your second language. Yeah, English is your second language, which is remarkable. So Danish and Portuguese.
Yeah, Brazilian Portuguese and Swedish and Japanese.
Wow, Swedish and Japanese.
Yeah.
Du har ett jättefint ansikte.
You're gonna have to try that one again.
Oh no, let's not.
No. Go ahead.
Okay. Du har ett jättefint ansikte. Ansikte. Jättefint. I'm probably saying
you mean ansikt.
Ansikt. Du har ett jättefint ansikte.
Jag tyckte bara du sa någonting som du har ett någonting, men jag kunde inte höra vad det andra var för någonting.
I don't know that much. I do know din mamma suger mig bröstpit. Hey, this podcast already has an explicit rating automatically. And Japanese.
Well, it's usually stuff like that people learn, though, isn't it?
Yeah. We'll talk more about Japanese when we chat a bit more about martial arts and stuff. But yeah, so do you want to show any of glimpses of the book?
Sorry, yeah, we'll do that too. Yeah,
because you're doing a fine edition. You're doing a fine edition. Yes. and a standard paper, a hardcover edition.
Hardcover. Right.
And they both, what you've shown me of them, both look gorgeous. The fine edition, honestly, might be taking fine editions to a new level, I think.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, I
really appreciate that.
We'll let people be the judge.
Right, of course.
And it's going to be only 50 copies, is that correct?
The limited fine edition is only going to be 50 copies and then done, and it's going to be that typical first come first serve, and it's going to be a pre-order to make sure we get it out of the way, not in terms of the book, but let people get in there and reserve their copies, and then done, we shut that down and we can start production to make sure that whoever wants a copy of that book, they get
Yeah.
a copy of the book. So
and it's a famous Edinburgh bookbinder doing it, correct?
no, it's actually a Glasgow
Oh, right.
bookbinder. It's a Glasgow printing company. It's based out of Govan in Glasgow, and they have two bookbinders working there. Fantastic bookbinders, and Gordon, the head bookbinder who has been in charge of this, he's done a fantastic job, and it was just a privilege getting to hang out with him so many afternoons and so many mornings, just standing there watching him work, and he would explain everything to me, and because I have a huge passion for bookbinding too, and I studied a lot of bookbinding on my own.
Yeah.
So getting to actually stand there watching a master at work, and hearing all the details, it was fantastic. But yeah, it's true. The book will be done first in this limited fine edition, limited to 50 copies. And as soon as they're done, as soon as they're all sold out, production will start. And as soon as production is set off, the standard hardcover is going to start to come out. So obviously the fine edition is going to be sold first, and then the standard hardcover is going to come out. But before I show it,
here's the first book I ever bound.
Oh, nice.
And I was every day after school for a while with a Scottish bookbinder in North Vancouver named Neil Wilkie, and he had bound all my dad's books for him in the 70s, and then I met him in the late 90s and went every day after school, and he taught me bookbinding and helped me bind my graduating thesis, and taught me how to do that. And then I showed it to my teachers, and they went to him and they learned bookbinding and started bookbinding classes for the high school. And next thing you know, my sister, who was younger than me, is binding all these books for me, which became like my magical diary books up there on the top shelf. Like half of those are books bound in silk and leather by my sister in high school. God bless her.
Very nice.
Yeah, bookbinding is a beautiful, passionate, wonderful thing for me, and I'm so glad you feel the same way about it. So yeah, let's get on to a little show and tell.
Right. So before I show it, I should probably finish mentioning exactly what it's about. Like I said, in book 15 in Scott's Discoverie of Witchcraft, and that was the thing you hinted at, that's where he gives you all of the how-to things, right? And this was sort of an example of his to bring up some of the more ceremonial stuff. Like I said, Scott had this weird relationship with magic where, like I said, when it came to witchcraft and stuff like that, he was very adamant about it's just a load of crap. But at the same time, he had tremendous respect for Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa and his De Occulta Philosophia Libri Tres, the 3 books of occult philosophy. He was actually, he spoke very highly of that. So it's kind of weird, right? Because here you have a book that is entirely dedicated to the occult sciences, mainly magic. And then Scott speaks highly of it, and elsewhere he just totally bashes magic as the most ridiculous thing in the world. But yeah, so in book 15, he gathered, it appears that he got 2 different manuscripts. It may have been just 1 manuscript, but I'm inclined to think it was 2, and so is the author of this book, also inclined to think it was 2, written by someone just identified as TR, and the other one is John Kokars. And it is impossible to find that source material today. The oldest source you can possibly find is Scott's Discoverie of Witchcraft of 1584. Wow. And so he basically it's an entire grimoire that he put there for everyone to get all the instructions. And because, ironically, you have this book by Reginald Scott that just bashes magic left and right, and ironically, it became one of the source works of magical practitioners back then. It became like a massive influence on magicians of the day. And it has influenced people all up until today. Unfortunately, the Discovery of Witchcraft is not it's easily glanced over these days, which I personally think is really sad. And the same for the author of this book, which was why it just had to be done, right? Because it greatly influenced Ebenezer Sibley in the 18th century. It influenced Frederick Hockley and Francis Barrett, and it has had a lot of influence, this grimoire section. And because of that, the author, whom I can't tell you much about, the author goes by the name of Frater S. That's it. and obviously at Hermetic Science Enterprises, we respect an author's desire to be anonymous. So that's that. But he really wanted this grimoire section from the Discovery of Witchcraft to be published as an actual grimoire. Yank it out of all that other stuff in the Discovery of Witchcraft, and just have that grimoire, but presented as an actual grimoire with all of the details, all of the annotations, footnotes, appendices, additional illustrations, whatever, to make it into a fully fledged grimoire. And that's exactly what this is.
Oh, gorgeous.
So this is the limited fine edition of the Grimoire of Reginald Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft, which comes in a fancy slipcase, of course, which is not only wrapped in the highest quality material available, but at the same time, it's very difficult to see, but if I turn on the light, you might be able to see how it's lined with velvet on the inside to really protect the leather.
Wow.
And then, of course, gold foiling on the front. And
a lot of gold foiling all around.
And then the book itself is bound. Crap. It's bound in chieftain goat.
I think that might be the sexiest thing I've seen in 2 years.
This is, like I said, chieftain goat, this leather, and it's insanely expensive. And
can you hold the spine up to the camera there?
Absolutely.
Just hold it there steady for a minute. Oh, wow. Yeah. Jesus. How many pages is the whole thing? It looks huge.
See, it is, because originally, if you just take that grimoire section and the other section, which we can discuss in a couple of minutes, that's also from the Discovery of Witchcraft, that's included here because it's just as grimoire relevant as all the other stuff. Originally, that together might have been maybe 150 pages or something along those lines. But this book is 464 pages. So a lot of additional stuff has been added to it.
Yeah. Well, I thought at first maybe you're calling it a grimoire for marketing, which is brilliant. But this now I actually feel like I have to have the special edition. So people, please donate to the podcast so I can buy this book.
Well, it has really been made to be a fully fledged grimoire, not just in terms of the author's contents, but also in terms of how I wanted to edit and design the book. And that's why I insisted on having it exactly like this. So it's traditional bookbinding style, in actual leather, not pleather, not that faux leather stuff. Not that I mind that or anything, but it had to be done properly and with raised spine bands and everything, and classical format. I just love this old school format that you don't really see anymore unless it's a book that is like 150 years old or something. And then I wanted it, again, because I wanted it to be a genuine grimoire, right? So I took two of the main pentacles. This is the pentacle that gives the person who has it on him or her mastery over the spirits. It makes the spirits obey you, basically, if you have that pentacle. And so naturally, it had to be on the front of the book. And the pentacle on the back is the one that whoever carries this pentacle, he will not be able to be harmed by any foe. That I'm paraphrasing here, but
what a great one to put on the front of the book.
That's why I thought they were, hey, this is an actual grimoire. It should actually have these pentacles.
And it's an actual talisman of protection.
There you go.
You can, the book could be a talisman of protection.
Right.
Against magic and harm.
And then people can consecrate
Beautiful.
it if they so wish, right?
I mean,
and
you want to give some good methods on consecration?
On the inside? Haha.
We like to have fun.
There will be some in the book.
There will be some in the book.
Oh,
and asked and answered. Asked and answered. What else could we want to know?
The end paper is hand marbled end paper. And I picked this because I thought it fit the theme that I really wanted to use this dark red leather. And I wanted to have black segments on it. And so because of that, I wanted the end paper to be this red and black mixture as well.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And then the satin bookmark inside, I then wanted black because it goes well with the rest of it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Oh my God.
that's
I
like
can't
the
believe I get to
aesthetics of the
debut
book.
this beautiful thing of beauty.
Yeah, this is actually the first time the book is gonna be displayed to the public. It's the first time it's
Yes.
gonna be shown, because it hasn't even been officially released yet, but it will be released along with this. So yeah, this
And
is
how many thousands of dollars will that cost?
well, that's the thing. I was given some advice on how much I should charge for it, and I was like, I can't get away with that. But you should. I was told I should charge £1,500 a copy, but I said no, it's not gonna be like that. No,
I mean, either way, once all 50 copies are sold, you know it's going to be selling for that amount, or if not more, especially since it's so gorgeous and there's only 50. Like, it's easy to be frustrated with that, but it's also understandable because it will instantly shoot up in value. Like, you know,
right.
I know I just realized I'm sounding like I'm making a sales pitch, but we're talking about occult publishing. We're doing a whole convo of occult publishing, so you know, it's appropriate. I mean, people out there are actually interested in getting into occult book publishing, and they should be.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing to do with your life.
Oh,
if you love occultism and you love ancient manuscripts and history and all of that, like, what a wonderful thing to do. The fact that there's actually a market for it for the first time probably since the Library of Alexandria or the medieval manuscript rage, when people were often just inventing manuscripts to sell to nobles who had the money,
right.
and want, you know, that those are out there. That's a real thing, people. You know, not every single grimoire from the medieval period was legit. It just wasn't. But, like, you know, witchcraft was illegal 70 years ago, right? So we're in an unparalleled time for access to information and people willing to invest in things that are worthwhile. And so it's a great thing for us to encourage people to keep doing it, because how many good publishers out there are there, in your opinion?
How many good publishers? Well, I don't like
we're talking shop.
Right. I don't like to speak ill of my colleagues.
Well, which one? No, just say which ones you like the best, that you think are the best.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, there are a couple of, I especially like the smaller publishers, a lot of the smaller publishers, because they tend to focus a lot more on the quality of what it is they're producing. Not to say anything bad about larger publishers like Samuel Weiser, Llewellyn Publications, and so on, because regardless of what people want to say about larger publishers and the standard paperbacks that come out from these places, one thing that has to be remembered is that they have a lot of classics. They have a lot of really important works. And this is something, obviously, that should be respected. But I have to admit, because I am a traditionalist by nature, as you very well know, and because I am very old-fashioned, I like the attention to detail, which is why I wanted to do that with my own publishing company as well. And that's why I especially like the smaller publishers and the attention to detail they put in the work that they do. And so, you know, that of putting out, for example, fine editions, I don't care about books costing £200, £300, £400, £500 when they are done right and it just looks beautiful and it's not just a book. If you just want a book, well, then go and get the paperback because it's a lot more affordable. But when you get something like that, you actually get a piece of art at the same time. Right. And I love that part, which was why I wanted to get into that as well. And so smaller publishers that do that, I have great love and admiration and respect for them.
You could really think of these publishers actually as artists, I'm realizing.
Right.
They're artists.
That's exactly right. If
you go into this kind of publishing, this kind of quality artistic publishing, it's because you're a fucking artist, I think.
Right.
Maybe, I don't know.
And, I like the ones that do this classical type of work with their publishing too, like old school type of design and so on. Just these little things, but that I think mean the world. And that's why I'm so adamant about using this stuff myself, is just simple things like using big leaf letter type drop caps and stuff like that in your typesetting, and using some Gothic lettering for the title pages and stuff like that. You know, these little things because there are too many of these books out there today where the content is phenomenal. It's a fantastic book you have, but it
Yeah.
looks so dull and dry because it has not been typeset properly. There's been put no detail into it whatsoever. And so, well, we don't have to mention any specific works or anything, but there are just some of them that they just look so dull and boring, and it's so sad because the contents are fantastic. And I know there will be people who will say that, no, it doesn't really matter as long as the contents are good. That's all that matters, which is true. That is number one. But the sad part is if people flip through a book like that and, oh my God, this just looks so boring, they put it away and they miss out on the otherwise amazing content. So I know how the old saying goes, don't judge a book by its cover. But those of us in publishing, we actually live a lot by, oh, you need to make sure that people can judge a book by its cover, so that it'll have a cool looking cover that'll capture their attention, but for the right reason, so that they will know this book is fantastic. This book is phenomenal. So pick it up and take a look.
So yeah. I'm guessing then that you like the work that Scarlet Press and Ouroboros do, those sort of ones.
Those were exactly the two I was about.
Oh, really?
To mention.
Oh, wonderful.
Scarlet Imprint. The books they have produced are really beautiful. They've produced some really nice limited fine editions. I might not be the biggest fan of the material itself. Some of it I am, but a lot of it is very left-hand path oriented and all this stuff. And as you know, I don't have any interest in that whatsoever. But that's fair enough. That's sort of what they focus on, and that's perfectly fine. It doesn't mean they can't produce beautiful books, right? So I have the utmost respect for the quality of their fine editions. And Ouroboros Press, same for them too. They publish some fantastic books.
Yeah, my buddy Joe from the good old Homsey days told me he's sending me his Hermetic dictionary. Right. That's by Ouroboros. So I look forward to finally owning an Ouroboros one. And Scarlet Imprint too. It's just, they do cost a few pennies. So what is the actual cost of this book, the fine 51 edition?
Well, see, that's the thing. Like I said, I don't want to go crazy in spite of what people recommended I do, because I want it to be affordable at the same time, because I want people to have the opportunity to actually buy these books. And so because of that, I think it should be a fair price compared to the expenses and so on. Obviously, it costs a minor fortune to make these books. If you look at how producing a paperback of like this format and this size could cost you a couple of bucks, right? Whereas producing a book like this, naturally, it's a whole different ballgame, right? So the price has not been set in stone yet, but it will be roughly £300.
All right. Save up, folks.
As soon as the book is officially released, obviously, then the fixed price is going to be there, but it'll be roughly £300. So expect it to be between £295 and £315. But I don't want to go much higher than that, since it's the first fine edition coming out. So I want people to be able to celebrate that a little bit too, instead of saying, oh, this book is going to be £450. Good luck, right? I mean, it's I want it to be as affordable as possible while still costing what it needs to cost to actually be able to make the wheels turn. If you know what I mean.
Well, I think that's a very reasonable price for how beautiful it is. And for those people just listening to the pre-release podcast audio, the video will be up very soon, and you can see what I'm talking about. And I think you'll agree with me that it is worth the shekels. So I'm thank you from the occult community for taking the time to put out such a beautiful thing.
It's my pleasure.
Of a book that is worthy, it seems, and it's been reworked into a grimoire, which is just, I mean, fabulous. It looks like it's actually going to be equally appealing to ceremonial magicians and grimoires as well as witches.
It very well might be. It very well might be. I mean, obviously, it's the material is it's classical Western magic. So it's grimoire tradition, ceremonial magic. So it's all about magical implements and magical circles and evoking spirits, etc., etc.
So for all of you Discovery of Witches fans out there of the show, you can own your own copy of the real Book of Life.
Well, I just really hope people will appreciate it for
it's a work
the
of art.
author's vision that it was, and then also what I have tried to do in terms of honoring that vision he had of wanting to put out an actual grimoire that's worthy of the content, you know, because we both agree that the content is just amazing, right? I mean, I've been a huge fan of that grimoire section of the Discovery of Witchcraft for years, and it's the same for the author. And so, wanting to put out an actual grimoire version of it, you know, and dispense with all the other stuff that has nothing to do with it, and just focus on that. And then I was like, this has to be done right, so it has to be done in this fancy edition as well. And I was very adamant about everything needs to be added to it then, so there will be no gaps. And so the book contains, and that's something I would really like to mention, that people who are familiar with the Discovery of Witchcraft will probably be wondering, and that is, they will wonder, is it a book based on the first edition of 1584 or the third edition of 1665? Because that is actually very important. Well, I haven't watched that in years. In any case, it's based on the 1665 edition, the third edition of 1665. Because for those who are not familiar with that, allow me to explain really briefly. In 1665, a third edition of the Discovery of Witchcraft was published, but it was not published the same way. There was an unknown contributor that Elizabeth Butler, in her book Ritual Magic, that she tends to refer to in that book as anti-Scot. Because it was clearly a pro-magic individual. We have no idea to this day who it is. You can speculate, but we don't know who that person was. But it was clearly someone who was not only pro-magic, but who was also very experienced. And that person added a few additional chapters to book 15. A chapter on magical circles and a chapter on consecration and some stuff like that. And in addition to that, in the end of Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft, there is a section on devils and spirits. And he's talking about the superstitious things and what the church says about devils and spirits and blah, blah, blah. Then in that third edition, that same person. Again, there's no name attached to it, but it's clearly the same pro-magic person who added another part after that is also concerning devils and spirits, but this is clearly from a magician's point of view. So here he is analyzing what devils are and what ghosts are and all this, and giving you explanations as to what they are in the magical sense. And there's a lot of fascinating information there. It's kind of like
sounds very similar to
magician's bestiary, sort of, if you will.
It sounds similar to the stuff in Rudd's grimoire.
Right.
He goes a lot into what gnomes are. They were very fascinated in those centuries about, you know, how to create a fairy changeling by getting busy with the spirit or elf.
Right. Hooking up.
Hey, this is what we did before Netflix.
Right. That was how people found entertainment.
Before Netflix and chill, it was hunting down fairies for a fun tryst.
Right. No,
amazing.
But this was a very, very, very fascinating section that definitely tied in so well with the grimoire contents of book 15 in the Discovery of Witchcraft, and that's why that definitely needed to be added to it. And so the book consists of those two parts, basically, that grimoire section and then that concerning devils and spirits. And on top of that, the author, Frateres, added a bunch of explanatory footnotes, you know, things to clarify certain things here and there, but also, even though the book mainly caters to the practitioner, it does also it does not ignore the academically interested. Obviously, those who are hardcore academics just want the original and take a look at that, right? But
there might be a few of the ESSWE people and ASE people out there in Amsterdam who might appreciate what you've done there. Maybe you know.
Right, because sometimes they do like to see, okay, well, as long as it's of academic interest in some form or fashion, we should take a look at it. And that's exactly what the author wanted to do.
One thing a lot of people don't realize about the academics who study esotericism is that even us right now having this conversation and the production of your book there, like they don't see this as participating in the academic study of esotericism. We are actually right now their primary source material. They're studying us right now. There are people writing papers on us, like this kind of conversation. The fact that modern magicians are putting out books like you are putting out here, that is subject for a paper. We're not participants with them in the study of esotericism by any means from their point of view. We are the subject of their study. A lot of people don't realize that.
That's actually very true. Very true. And you can especially say that too, since the author of this book is himself a practitioner of classical Western magic.
And in your opinion, as a human being, this is a useful book to a magician.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, having dealt with occult publishing, with esoteric publishing in all these years, and having read a bunch of this material myself and so on, it's, absolutely. This would definitely be useful. And especially because of all the footnotes and things that have been added and all the appendices that has been added to the book as well, because a lot of the stuff in the different magical operations covered in this grimoire, it'll then say stuff like, okay, then you have to do this and that prayer, or then you have to recite this and that psalm, etc., etc. And then obviously that would mean someone would have to stand there with the grimoire in one hand and a big fat Bible in the other hand, or at least a buttload of notes and stuff. To dispense with all that, all of the psalms and prayers and so on that are referenced in the operations are given in appendices in the book. So you basically just have to flip back and forth to find what you're looking for.
And with a beautiful little ribbon, that's even
right, with a little ribbon.
And hey, I'm not recommending people alter the fine edition of the book if they buy it from you. But as someone, as when I learned bookbinding, I realized how easy it was to add my own ribbons to things if I wanted more. It's very easy to,
well, then there you go.
To take a popsicle stick and press on a glued little ribbon to your book. Though I'm not saying people should alter this masterpiece, but you can do that. I do that with my Skinner books. I glue on my own little ribbons, and that way I have, and they're extremely even more useful because they are extremely useful. Right. And they're made to be accessible and useful, which is great. So I mean that's the whole point. Yeah.
Right. And this is hopefully also something that people are really going to appreciate about this book, is that it's like both the author and myself, we've gone through all of the efforts we possibly could to make this book as complete a grimoire as possible. Obviously, there will always be some things that are just from a historical perspective, it's just like it's impossible to identify a certain something, so you can speculate, and then that's as far as it goes. I mean, because there were some things too that were written in a certain way, and then I was thinking, it's too bad we can't do anything about that. We can't find it, but it was just impossible to track down, so you make do with what you have, right? But everything has otherwise been, everything that's been referenced is then put in the back. Even the holy water formula that's given in it to make holy water is based on the Catholic formula, and so because of that Catholic formula, because there are many inconsistencies, as you know, in grimoires, there are always inconsistencies. There are things that are misspelled and miswritten and this and that.
I think you're wrong on that, brother. I think every single one of those instances is an intentional blind.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's how you're really supposed to look at it.
Well, that's how I read typos in like modern occult books. It's just a blind. I mean,
it's all intentional.
Yeah. I mean, there's masters of blinds out there. Shout out to Nick. I love you. I was going to say, do you want to show off quickly the standard hardcover? Because it's actually also gorgeous. And the printer, whoever you're working with, has certainly upped their game, I think, recently in quality. So that's really, it's a beautiful thing for us to see the more accessible hardcover version for everyone out there who didn't make $1 billion during COVID.
Right, and so can't afford the fancy edition. Well, this is what the standard hardcover is going to look like.
I love that cover so much. Oh my God, it's.
I'll give you a view of the back. And then, of course, always have to add a little bit of stuff to the flaps as well about the book itself. And then, did anyone? There were two people. There were two people who got to have a little sneak a peek at this book. So apologies to anyone.
I didn't get my copy.
No, that's why. Apologies.
Why wasn't I one of the two people?
Well, that's the thing. We weren't actually talking about the book at that time. I will happily include you in the next publication. So I actually sent a copy to Gary St. Nottingham, who himself is not at all an unknown author in terms of occult literature. Gary has put out a lot of really cool books on both the magic and alchemy, and I greatly respect Gary and his works, and because of that, because I know he is very much into classical Western magic himself, I wanted to ask if he was willing to accept a copy, read it, and give me his honest opinion, and if he liked it, if he would want to write a short blurb for the dust jacket. And I sent one to Brian, or Frater Ashen Shasan, who is also a very popular author these days and very well known in the circle of Grimoire practitioners, right? And we love him as well.
Yeah, we love him so much on this podcast. We don't even call him Ashen Shasan. We call him Ashi Chassi.
Ashi Chassi, that's right. I heard it.
I think in Hebrew the emphasis would even be. I think it would be Ashen Hassan. I think in Hebrew that's how the emphasis would be on the syllables. Ashen Hassan. But it's his name, so whatever he wants. And he's got such a great sense of humor. So you sent a copy to him, and what did he have to say about the book?
Well, if you want me to, I can read the two blurbs that they wrote for it.
Well, I think that's what we're here for.
All right. Well, then let me read what Gary wrote first. Gary wrote, "This new work presented by Frater S. gives the occult practitioner a clear and useful means of ingress into the Elizabethan occult world via a literary work that has not only been highly influential in the later writings that were produced by Sibley, Barrett, and in more recent times, Paul Hewson, but has also been used successfully by a wide variety of magical practitioners over the years. Now, today's occult student for the first time can study and practice the material in this clear and concise presentation." And then Brian, or Frater Ashen Shasan, or Ashi Chassi, as you say, wrote, "Scott's discovery of witchcraft stands as a pivotal source for Western classical ritual magic. Frater S. does a superbly skilled job at presenting this classic in an organized and usable manner. In much the way classical magical texts are being translated, he presents the material faithfully as it is, with noted corrections, changes, and observations where the text is likely to make the most sense."
Brian is a man with great, skill with words, unlike me, apparently. From what I just said. It's not my most eloquent morning. Though I did have to get up at 7 a.m. for us to do this today. It's the most fun I've had it's the most fun I've had at 7 a.m. since last time I probably had a girlfriend. I don't know. No, yesterday I was carving on my hazel wand before sunrise, and after I know it's retrograde, but I actually have a theory on that. I have a theory on that. Yeah, even Ashen Shasan posted his wands, and people start posting their wands, which is it's great. It's wonderful. That's that group and 2 other groups is the only reason I have a Facebook account. I do so well during Mercury retrogrades. Like I become happy, I become super productive during Mercury retrograde. And my mom's a 50-year professional astrologer. She's 73 or 74 now. I should know that. But she helped me understand that based on the placement of my Mercury and Mars and conjunctions and some other things, it makes sense, she says. So it's like, well, if during Mercury retrograde my personality becomes optimized, I feel it, the channel clearer than ever, I'm just going to go with that. I'm not going to like pretend like I'm having a rough time and not do certain magic things, because I know it's a breach with tradition, but it's like, I also trust in God and trust in my own higher self, and when in doubt, there's always a little LRH or Mercury that can buffer things, in my opinion, as a GDite. So that's fucking fabulous that you got such great quotes from such reputable scholars in this area. I'm absolutely stoked.
I'm very, very grateful. I'm very grateful
to get the copy of the book, and who knows, maybe if my listeners are gracious enough with their donations, I might get one of those fine editions. We shall see. I don't mind twisting the arms of my my listeners, or better yet, putting them in an onikudaki. Yata,
right.
Yata, anata wa onikudaki des. No, anata wa Scott's Grimoire of Witchcraft des. Is that right?
Well, then you're telling me that I am Scott's Discoverie of Witchcraft.
Watashi wa Scott's Grimoire des.
If you want to say, well, then you're saying you are Scott's Discoverie of Witchcraft.
Okay, so clearly I don't speak Japanese. What is it
you're trying to say?
I just had to throw out some Japanese there because people complain whenever I try to speak Japanese. They say they get upset, and that's really why I have this podcast, is to get people's panties in a twist.
If you want to say that you want a copy of this book, you could just say watashi wa kono hon ga hontou ni hoshii desu yo. Like saying, I really want this book.
Watashi wa kono hon ga
hontou ni hoshii desu yo.
Hontou ni hoshii desu.
Hoshii desu yo.
Hoshii desu yo.
Yeah, if you want to speak formally, and if you're from Kansai, you don't say hontou ni, you say honmani.
No, I'm from Osaka in another life. This does move us on to the third and final stage of our episode, and Ashen Shasan is a great intro into it, because here's the question: you and he are both master ninjas. You both are hardcore ninjas, and I remember when we met, you and I, 20 plus years ago, and I was there down in LA doing my thing, and you were out in the grass doing backflips and rolls, and next thing I know, you backflipping over me and teaching me techniques, because I was, of course, I'm an eternal beginner in Bujinkan, I feel like, and that's okay. But you Ashen Shasan, of course, went to Japan, got his 5th Dan with Hatsumi, and you did too.
I did.
Tell us about that. A lot of ninjutsu fans listening to this podcast. I've had comments actually from people like, "Hey, can you put markers so I can just hear the ninjutsu stuff?" I'm like, well, that's odd, but let's roll with it.
Well, I mean, my Godan Shiken, my 5th degree black belt test, was, as so many others, I took mine at the Hombu Dojo. Well, the old Hombu. They've built a new one, as you may have heard. But the old Hombu Dojo. I prefer doing it there as opposed to the Tokyo Budokan, where Hatsumi Sensei also gives lessons, or at least used to. I'm not sure if he still does that. But I got mine in a super crowded Hombu Dojo. I was so packed you could barely do any training. I actually think the person, because Hatsumi Sensei always tries to find someone or someone who knows you, a shihan who knows you, to do your test.
Oh, really?
But since I was there by myself.
How about you just quickly describe what the test is for those who don't know? Because it's a fabulous, remarkable test.
Well, the Godan Shiken is you sit in seiza. You sit in seiza no kamae, which is, just sitting down on your knees, traditional Japanese seated posture. And you close your eyes and you're supposed to just relax. And then you will have a shihan, a senior instructor, as we would say, who will then grab, nowadays they use a shinai. Sometimes they will use a bokuto, a wooden sword, but they will use a shinai, which is the bamboo sword used in kendo. Probably because it's a bit more merciful, because there have been a lot of people who don't move properly.
I've seen videos of Hatsumi using a bokudo and whacking people when they failed the tests. And
I've
damn,
seen
that's
people
gotta
get
hurt.
whacked with it. Oh, absolutely. Even just the shinai is gonna hurt.
Oh yeah.
It makes a lot more noise than the actual power of the impact. Well, it hits you powerfully, but it doesn't hurt as much as it sounds it would, and that's why it's usually used nowadays. But don't get me wrong, it'll still hurt getting hit with that thing. But yeah, and then that shihan will move up behind you, and will raise the shihan above your head, and then whenever he's ready, doesn't matter if you're ready or not, whenever he's ready, he will emulate a killing intent, what in Japanese is called a saki. That's why it's called the test of Saki-jutsu. Saki-jutsu means the art of killing intent. And so basically he will create an artificial output, if you will, of wanting to actually kill you, actually take your life.
Yeah.
Even though he knows consciously he's just standing with shinai in his hands, but he's going to create that actual mental output of, you're gonna die, and I'm gonna split your skull open, basically. I know it's a very colorful way to put it, but that's
the idea I always thought was, because I always thought about it in sort of psychical terms when I was starting out in ninjutsu. Like if you don't have that killing intent out, what is there to sense? It's like it doesn't trigger the same response, because you're facing away from someone who's going to hit you at their whim. And you have to magically just know when to roll away right before, not too early and not too late, the right exact moment. And my teacher, my first shihan, he said it's actually not that hard. We could even practice it in class if we wanted, because there is a natural sense. Like, you're not trying to get lucky. You're trying to demonstrate an extreme level of sensitivity to the killing intent. Correct? Yeah. Exactly. So, because you want that on the street. You want that in your life. When you sense that killing, and I've felt it, especially as a Celtic bar musician, often I felt that shift. And all of a sudden, guys from behind the bar are leaping across. They feel it too. They jump almost before the action happens. And next thing you know, like, a fight's being broken up, and it happens on a dime. And it's a good sense to have.
It is, and it's something you will see a lot of experienced police officers and people in the military as well tend to develop, that they just start feeling something is off when something is about to happen. Obviously, part of it is being able to read signs and so on, but a lot of it also is because of constantly being surrounded with those circumstances. It tends to make you a bit more attuned to how things feel. The same thing as when people describe that sensation of someone watching them, and then they turn around and they see there's actually someone standing there staring at them. It's similar to that, but it's a more specific thing in this case, where it is that intent to actually lethally harm you, right? And that's what you're supposed to pick up on and then roll out of the way. So it's not just being able to sense it, it's a combination of that, and then having proper taihenjutsu, or bodily movement skills, or bodily movement techniques, as we call it, which would be rolling out of the way properly, so you don't actually get whacked. It's not enough to just do like this. You're going to get hit in the back of the neck, or move to the side. You're going to get whacked in the shoulder. So you need to actually roll out of the way. So it needs to be a proper combination of these two, and that's how you pass your 5th degree black belt test. There have been cases where people pick up on not necessarily killing intent, but they pick up on presence. And it seems that sometimes Hatsumi Sensei, he chooses differently. If he feels that the person who moved there with just the right timing, that was just pure luck, because he was kind of twitchy and he just happened to get it right. No, then he goes, once more, please. And then, they have to do it again. But sometimes people will sit there completely still and they're not moving a muscle, and the person is not hitting it, but he's just stepping up behind you and he's about to put the sword on the top of your head, and the person rolls out of the way. There's obviously no killing intent, but they sense there's something wrong here, and they move out of the way. And then sometimes he will pass them based on that, even though it was not the actual Saki, but because they were sufficiently sensitive, but still sufficiently calm to just sit there. But if people are twitchy, he will put it down to, no, it's just because he got lucky, because he was waiting for something. He was just waiting for the right timing. But this other guy was sitting still for like half a minute, not moving a muscle. And then right before the sword gets put on his head, before the test is about to start, he moves perfectly out of the way. And then he will still pass them based off of that. It's kind of rare, but he will do it. I've seen him do it a couple of times.
Yeah, well, we trust in Hatsumi to know.
Well, that's the thing. You would expect him to
all
tell
like
you
that.
if you need to do it again, or if
Yeah.
it's like, no, that was good enough. I saw something that definitely showed this person is absolutely 5th degree black belt or higher, so he passes or she passes, right? But yeah, so that's basically what that test is all about. So it's a famous or infamous, if you will, test in the Bujinkan, this Saki-jutsu test.
Yeah, I talked with Ashen Shisan also about Kujikiri a bit. Did you have you had any experience with that? Because it's one of those things that you can actually become quite experienced in ninjutsu, I think, and actually not encounter that much. And then there's, of course, there's even here in British Columbia, there's been some ninjutsu teachers who do entire seminars and courses and retreats focusing on Kujikiri. And it's fascinating to me because of what it is. And I'm just curious if you have any knowledge on that.
Well, I've actually done a fair bit of study of Kuji no Ho, or the method of Kuji, or the method of the 9 characters, where people usually say 9 syllables, but it can also be interpreted as 9 characters, because it's the ji as in kanji, the Chinese character. You know, the more elaborate characters in the Japanese language, but they're adopted from Chinese, hence Chinese character. But it's that same kanji, ji, which means character. So Kuji technically means 9 characters, and Ho means method. So Kuji no Ho means the method of Kuji, or the Kuji method. And I was very fascinated with that, obviously because of my interest in esotericism, right? So I did a lot of study on that. Now, I was actually fortunate enough to learn some stuff in Japan from some of the old Japanese shihan. There were some preparatory techniques that had to do with chakra work and stuff like that, actually. Something called hinokokyu, which means fire breathing, that Nakadai sensei used to teach. And he said that's actually some preliminary training for that of working with Kuji no Ho. And this was something I found out, that there are various other systems of this this practice that in Japanese Mikyo, as it's called, like it's this Buddhist esoteric doctrine, right? You have different schools of it, different styles. You have Tendai Mikyo, Shingon Mikyo, and that kind of stuff. But it's that thing that we call Mikyo. It's these Buddhist esoteric disciplines where they do all this stuff with hand seals, and then they sit there, and it's basically a practice. A lot of people identify it as Eastern magic, but it's basically a practice that is used for spiritual development. But some of the side effects are different paranormal phenomena, if you will. Like one thing is being able to heal yourself or heal someone else, and another one is being able to achieve like a cosmic intelligence, and you know, receive answers from the universe, and others are about being able to manipulate someone else purely mentally, like a form of telepathic assault, if you will, and that kind of stuff. Those are some of the quote unquote side effects of doing this work, but it is mainly for purposes of spiritual development. And I found out that there are various of these like Kundalini and chakra activation type practices that tie into that, because this has to do with, you know, the old esoteric principles of Buddhism, where you have these yogic teachings, etc., that incorporate all of these esoteric elements. Doing poses and postures and so on in yoga to manipulate how the flow of the energy moves through the body is one thing, and then using these hand gestures known as mudras, right, in Sanskrit. It's what's known as ketsui in Japanese.
Yeah.
It's another way of manipulating the flow of energy. Oh yeah, that one.
That one took me a while as a kid, because
You remember what it's called?
No, I don't. Sadly,
that one is pole.
Oh, I want to get back into it. I mean, when I came back to Canada from California I guess a year ago, they were doing ninjutsu classes, but then it got shut down before I could even attend one, and we're not allowed to do it still. So yeah, hopefully we'll get back to that, because it's a good gang of guys here that they're nice. When I was 10, I had been meditating twice a day since I was 7, so a long time. And then I saw American Ninja, and guess what I started doing while I was meditating?
Oh, you would of course sit there doing hand seals, right?
And after 3 years of meditating a lot, even as a child, adding those in was very interesting. But I didn't know what to do with them, and it didn't really seem like I was activating anything new. It just made it more interesting to me. And of course, I slowly did move away from transcendental meditation entirely, and the whole Maharishi thing. I got a bad taste in my mouth as soon as I found out that Maharishi, my parents told me Maharishi considers, gays to be unnatural. And I was like, what the fuck? I mean, come on. Because I was hearing that from my Christian family in Missouri, like they were paddling us because of playing Dungeons and Dragons and like all this. I just had enough of all that shit. It didn't didn't affect me personally, because I'm not gay, but it outraged me even at that young age. You know what I mean? And I was like, I can't deal with that stuff anymore. Just done with it.
Understandably.
And yeah, I did only see any sort of kujikiri or magic demonstrated once in ninjutsu training. One teacher I had was training a lot under our sort of Takasagi dojo, Shihan, Phil Lagar sensei. He's that guy who like trained the CIA in Bujinkan, like that dude. And one of my teachers had learned some of this stuff from him and demonstrated some, like, it seemed like meridian line cutting stuff to delete energy while in grappling positions. It was very strange. Again, it's something I hope to learn more about in the future from as the world opens up and I can get back to it, because yeah, it's
but it is a very, very interesting area. Absolutely.
Ninjutsu has brought so much to my life. Like I actually, I got my roommate Martin into it when I was 18 and living at Temple Tahuti, going to college, and I couldn't do ninjutsu before 18. They wouldn't let me. So as soon as I turned 18, boom, I was out there at the base of a mountain 3 hours, 3 nights a week on the cement, learning dive rolls and Gogyo. We were a Gogyo, very centered on Gogyo. Like we did like 30 minutes of that at the beginning of every class, just going through all the Gogyo, which I really love that because it's so elemental. It's so 5 elemental based, like from earth up to spirit. And the best times. And I told my roommate Martin that I was doing, he was like, holy shit, can I come? So I would drive him with me, and we got upset. We would train at a gazebo on the cement at Crab Beach or Shell Beach every morning, 7 a.m. Well, not every morning, but sometimes a lot. Just jog up from the temple, past the strip club, down over the bridge to this little thing. And we would just go to town on each other. We would fight. We would fight. And it was a beautiful time in my life. So
that's what good old training was like too. Actually, when you mentioned that thing about Gogyo, it reminds me of when you had the conversation with Ashin Shasan about exactly that.
That interview is going to get a few more listens after this podcast.
It most likely will.
Yeah. I apologize, people, for being so nervous that I got stoned before the interview, and by the end I was pretty much out of it. So. Forgive me. I'm not. Don't consider myself good at podcasting at all. I just enjoy it.
Was still a good interview. It was still
Thank you.
Good interview. I greatly enjoyed it. I've listened to it twice.
Oh fuck!
Yeah, no, I want to give you something that you might appreciate, both from a Bujinkan perspective as well as from the perspective of an occultist. That's the whole Gogyo thing, because apparently it seems like your teacher used to call it Gogyo. But remember the thing that Ashin Shasan mentioned, that they usually call it Sanshin no Kata, because that's technically what it's called in the Densho, in the written transmissions, in the scrolls. They're not always in the form of scrolls. Some old Japanese texts are in the form of old Japanese books. Some of them are in scrolls, but we call them Densho. Densho means written transmission, right? And in that, it's called Sanshin no Kata, which means the three hearts form, or the three spirits form, depending on how you read that kanji, that usually translates as heart. But technically, they are actually not the Gogyo. They are actually the Godai. And here's the thing, the Gogyo and the Godai are not the same thing. There are 5 elements, but they're 2 different sets. In Sanshin no Kata, you use the Godai, which is Chi, Sui, Ka, Fu, Ku. So earth, Chi, earth, Sui, water, Ka, fire, Fu, wind or air, and Ku, void or emptiness, right? Those are the forms you do when you do the Sanshin no Kata. But that's the Godai, which means the 5 great. The Gogyo are different. The Gogyo are Do, which is still Chi. It's still also earth, but it's more in the sense of soil, right? So Do, Sui, water, Ka, fire, Moku, wood, and Kin, metal or gold, but it's also used to describe metal. So those are the Gogyo. But if you think back to doing the Sanshin no Kata, there's nothing called Moku no Kata, like a wooden kata, or Kin no Kata. It's Fu no Kata, the air pattern, and Ku no Kata, the void pattern or emptiness pattern. So that's the difference between those two sets of elements, the Godai and the Gogyo. Chi, Sui, Ka, Fu, Ku, and Chi or Do, Sui, Ka, Moku, Kin.
Wow. Yeah. Our teacher didn't thank you. Domo.
Oh, no, just in case you found it interesting from an esoteric perspective and from a Bujinkan perspective.
Yeah.
There is actually a difference between those two. So when you speak of the esoteric element that you find in the Bujinkan, such as Kujin and Kujikiri, they talk about the Godai, that one, the Chi, Sui, Ka, Fu, Ku. But when it then talks about the Doton no Jutsu, for example, it's the Tompo or Ton no Jutsu, escape methods or escape techniques. Then they will use the Gogyo, because then they use Do, earth or soil, and Sui, water, Ka, fire, Moku, wood, and Kin, metal, for escape techniques. So, like using metal to facilitate an escape, it would be stuff like throwing makibishi on the ground as you're running away, and people step on them when they're chasing you down. And Mokuton no Jutsu is using wood to facilitate an escape. So stuff like hiding in bushes until you can get out of there. They give up looking for you. Or
we did lots of that.
Stuff like that, right?
We would do nights, just stealth nights, where we're in the rain at the foot of Grouse Mountain. And so it's like lush, temperate rainforest, right? And it's just trees and underbrush, and there'd be a play structure. My teacher would put one person on the play structure, and their job was just to look around, not move, just sit where they are on the play structure. And under the play structure was a bunch of gravel, and then an open field all around, lined by trees, and the person had a flashlight. So if they saw you, they would shine the flashlight on you. If they saw you, period, you were out. And we crawled all the way through the underbrush, had to get through the forest, moving silently, and somehow get across the grass, this open area, across the gravel, without the person seeing us, and touch them on the back. And we would do that over a period of like 3 hours in the rain, full gear. And it was doable. Like, we learned how to lie flat on grass and where the shadows would hide us and where they wouldn't. We also learned amazing things like, wow, black is actually not the best color because you stand out even in a shadow. Whereas if you wear red, you sink right in. And then moving across gravel in an open area without being heard or seen, that was a treat in the rain. But we learned, and people like Martin were there with me. We did it. We did that stuff. And one of my other friends from old Tahuti days just gave me all her ninjutsu books. So I brought like I'm finally going to learn the terms, because our teacher just didn't want us to bother learning the terms. He said, you can learn all the Japanese terms before your Shidoshi test, the blackout test or whatever. Learn them all before that. We didn't stretch. He's like, you can stretch at home, you can stretch before class. You're here to learn technique. Right. And I like that, because I had a long history of many years in Taekwondo classes in different traditions, where it felt like most of the class was just an exercise class where we're just like running around doing push-ups. Like, I'm paying a lot of money for this, and when people want to fight me, I'm going to do a push-up.
Now, my first teacher back in Denmark, he was also along those lines, where he was like, yeah, but the terminology and so on. Oh yeah, that's an old.
I'm very excited to read this Stick Fighting Techniques of Self-Defense by Hatsumi and Quentin Chambers.
Classic. That's where some of the old classical techniques with a humble are depicted.
Very cool stuff indeed. Yeah, using wood.
Oh yeah. I remember that one. That was one of the first techniques I learned with a humble.
The ability to use hanbo or any tool to brace someone's arm, and the way to apply pressure in certain spots to break free has actually gotten me out of a few real life grappled situations where some drunk asshole was trying to hug me too much or something because he liked my performance. It happens, right? And you just and then you try and get away, and they're drunk, so they get aggressive, and you're like, you just press your pint glass into the right part of their forearm, and they're like, ow, and you boot it.
Right.
Hey, we trained with salt shakers and all kinds of we did whole classes on just using everyday things. How would you fight if you were sitting in a diner and the person across from you attacked you, right? Throw the glass in there, smash it, slit their throat.
Right.
I mean, this is why ninjutsu is not in the Olympics, right? There's no competition for eye gouging.
No, there really isn't.
It's
let's see how that would go. I don't see
and
how
so
that would go so well.
Let's we could talk ninjutsu forever, and we'll talk about it more, but you actually don't practice ninjutsu anymore. You've moved on and you went to Brazil, which is where you found yourself a lovely wife, and learned Portuguese and studied not Brazilian jiu-jitsu but capoeira.
That's right.
Which makes sense, because you're a dexterous flippy motherfucker. I mean, I remember standing outside of Morningstar Research Center in LA. We're on the grass. You're showing me some holds, and you did put me in this one hold, and you're like, see, I can't get out. And you tried everything, and I really resisted, and you couldn't get out. And you said, unless I do this, and you did a fucking flip over my head, bringing me down onto my back. And I to this day, it's one of the best experiences of my life. Thank you. Thank you for that. Literally, it was like my life became a movie for a second. And yeah. I was like, shit, man, this guy's next level. I love it. And of course, we lost touch and found each other again on Facebook. But fortunately, because we didn't know each other's real names and all of that stuff. And that was 2002. And then how could you find someone again after that? There was literally no way. So it's been a blessing having you back in my life. Yeah.
Same here. Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
No, it was nice to be able to reconnect again. I was really happy that we were able to find each other on Facebook.
Oh,
hey, it's been a long time.
I saw Lenny. I was like, that. I knew that. I was like, holy shit. And yeah, fucking A. Yeah. I'm so glad I made a Facebook account with my old GD motto, plain for all to see. It's been an adventure, shall we say, but hey, it's COVID and we're still in lockdown after 2 years. So it's not like there's been much else to do.
Right. True.
I'm having a little birthday party tomorrow with a friend who's in an AA OTO magician and a friend who's in one of the many GD orders, and he was my oldest friend, and they happen to be a drummer and a bassist, so we have a drum kit at a friend's house. I'll play guitar, they'll play bass, we'll play drum, and that'll be my wee little birthday party in lockdown.
That sounds cool.
And
should be good fun.
Yeah, I'll take some pictures, send you, or maybe sing a song for you.
Oh yes, please.
Tell me about Capoeira, because we have a very famous Capoeira school here in Vancouver, and I've watched the teacher there perform. He's trained some of my Axa Capoeira. I've walked by that, bus by that. I lived down the street from that for years. I mean, I've watched them perform in City Center. They do amazing performances, and I've had many friends study there for years until their joints gave out and they had to stop and became alcoholics.
Oh, that was a
It's
terrible
true.
way to go.
It's actually true. I'm thinking about one guy. Anyway, but you, yeah. So what was it like going from ninjutsu into capoeira, especially in Brazil?
Well, see, well, that's the thing. I'll have to make a few minor adjustments
Did you
to
just
get
throw
the
caution to the
background
wind and move to
story.
Brazil?
No. It wasn't like that. Um, First of all, when I moved from well, I didn't really move from Bujinkan Budo into, yeah, I'm sorry, I should probably clarify. I know a lot of people tend to still refer to Bujinkan Budo as ninjutsu. I personally don't, and I haven't done that in many years. But that's because, as you know, I'm a massive history geek,
Mm.
and my main passion when I got into Bujinkan Budo was ninjutsu, or shinobi no jutsu, as it technically used to be called before it was eventually pronounced ninjutsu. It's the same as the word ninja is sort of a more modern reading of those two kanji. It used to be pronounced shinobi no mono, and just for short, shinobi. Shinobi was actually used more.
Yeah,
And
in
eventually
Vancouver
shinobi no
we
mono
use
and then
nimpo.
ninja.
Yeah, we
Right,
often use
right.
nimpo a lot here.
But you see, the thing is,
But we
the
use
reason
all the
why,
names. Everyone here I know uses all the names. They change the names on the posters. One year it'll be taijutsu, one year it'll be nimpo, one year it'll be takasagi bujinkan. Like it's that's why it's ninja, because they literally don't care about how it's called, because that's not what's really going on. The presentation is all illusion, right?
right,
Like coup,
right,
like coup. Don't watch the hand while I kick you in the balls.
right. That's exactly the point of that hand.
It's literally exactly the point of the
Yes,
technique. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
No, but the reason why I stopped referring to it as ninjutsu is because I found it a bit of a misnomer. Because while Bujinkan Budo does contain three different ninjutsu ryuha, nowadays, very unfortunately, very little actual shinobi no jutsu is being taught in the Bujinkan. It's not like in the old days. My teacher back in the day used to teach us a buttload of that stuff. It was the same for us, learning stealth techniques and like concealment tactics and all this stuff when we got to practice all of these things, right? All of this classical shinobi no jutsu stuff, this covert warfare stuff, right? But obviously the focus became mainly the kobujutsu aspect, the traditional old Japanese martial arts, the same stuff that the generic warriors back then would learn, like Jiu Taijutsu techniques, Daken Taijutsu techniques, Jiu-Jitsu techniques, Goppo Jutsu techniques, Koshi Jutsu, or Sto Jutsu, as it was also called back in the day. Yeah, that kind of stuff, right? And then all of the different weapons techniques, Kenjutsu, Shuriken Jutsu, Bojutsu, Sojutsu, and so on, right? But what was classified as ninjutsu or shinobi no jutsu was much more specific. It was all of this covert warfare. So it was all this about infiltration tactics and strategies and escape techniques and sabotage techniques and like strategies and tactics for arson and all this guerrilla warfare stuff, and how you best sneak in without anyone knowing you're there, getting the information or destroying the enemy compound from inside, or causing enough mayhem to be able to have the your allies on the outside bust in and then kill everybody, right? And no one will ever know you're there until all hell breaks loose. Or if you're just gathering information, perfect mission scenario, no one ever knows anyone was there, ever, right? And unfortunately, a lot of that stuff is not being taught in the Bujinkan anymore. And so because of that, I thought it was a misnomer labeling it ninjutsu. And it was very much a thing a lot of dojos would still do to sort of like market it, if you will.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of, in the States even, there's courses where you like get your black belt in 1 year in ninjutsu, and they are actual like shihans who are teaching it. They were, often pass their test with Hatsumi, but it's
Right.
like a bunch of DVDs or video course and then a black belt 12 months later.
Right. There's too much of that stuff nowadays, and too many people, unfortunately. This is not to speak ill of the Bujinkan or anyone in it.
No, they're doing this in universities with PhDs, man.
Right. It's just the thing where when people take something and try to make it into something, it's not just for the sake of making money or making it a cool thing, and there's too much of that stuff nowadays where people aren't just focusing on like the good old saying, shut up and train, right? It's not there anymore for a lot of people, and that's the sad part. That was actually the reason why I stopped training. Don't get me wrong, I trained with some fantastic Shihan over in Japan, both Nakadai Sensei, I love the guy to death, and he's a fantastic teacher. Yoshida Sensei was a fantastic teacher, and also Sakaguchi Sensei and Mitsuhashi Sensei in Osaka, also fantastic teachers. But it's just the whole thing started to, it became too much of I don't know if tourist trap is the right thing to say, but there was just too much of that and too much hoopla and things, too many egos getting involved and things starting to become messy and it's falling apart. And it seems like even Hatsumi Sensei is kind of sort of just washing his hands off of it. It's not to say anything bad about him, but it just looks like the way he's sort of distributing everything now, it seems like he's kind of just, yeah, okay, just let people just do their thing because I'm done.
He is done. He not only kept the tradition alive from his teacher Takamatsu, right? Claw hands, man, like that dude is, the legends are crazy. But Hatsumi kept it alive. Yeah, Hatsumi's kept it alive. He's made it so big, it's never going away. So yeah.
But unfortunately, a lot of people have taken it in a lot of directions that it shouldn't have gone in my humble opinion. And that's one of the reasons why I decided, okay, I'm just not going to do this anymore, because I used to love the old school training and I still love that to death. Granted, my main passion within the Bujinkan is still the ninjutsu aspect, which was what I really missed, which was why I started studying a lot of the old material myself. I started tracking down hand reproduced copies of old ninjutsu texts.
Of course you did.
And actually got a hold of it. Oh yeah, I have copies of the Shoninki and Shinobi Hiden and Rodanshu and stuff like that. A very good friend of mine in Japan, Yuta, he and I are both massive ninjutsu, like historical ninjutsu fanatics. And we have done nothing but research the crap out of it.
Hey, maybe you think he'd ever maybe do we could do a roundtable podcast, and maybe he'd come on and we can get Ash and Shasan on and have like three of you guys talking, and I'll just learn and listen. He
actually works with ninjutsu history now at a university in Iga, and he lives in Iga. He lives in the old Iga no Kuni. He lives in a small village called Furuyama in Mie Prefecture.
In probably have some very
Iga no Kuni.
Probably have some very good onigiri there.
Oh yeah, well you get good onigiri all over the place. But I'm sure he would love to talk about it, because he just really wanted, his dream was to get to work with ninjutsu history professionally, and he actually does that now. He works for the university.
Wow.
And,
so
I'm sure he would love to do it.
Yeah, if we could do like the four of us would get Brian on board. I'm sure he could answer so many questions, and it wouldn't really be a magical podcast, but it'd be an awesome podcast.
Oh, I think so too.
Yeah.
It would have to be like in a parenthesis, ninjutsu, magic without fears.
Ninjutsu without ninjas without fears. I don't know. We'll come up with, I'll make a special graphic. If you talk to your guy, we'll make it, and Brian comes on, we'll make a special topic. I'll make a special graphic just for it, and we'll have fun with it. That would be amazing. That would, like, maybe we can do that in the spring, early spring or something.
That would be very cool.
That'd be awesome.
Very cool. I'll talk to Yuta and see if we can't set something up.
Yeah.
I'm sure he would love to do it.
I won't talk to Ashton Shasan. I'll leave the listeners to go and bother him.
Right.
I'm just joking. Anyway, I'm always people. I'm surprised sometimes by how many people still actually listen to this. Like, how I've covered like a lot of academics essays, like Dr. Hanegraaff's essays. Yesterday, I found out he knows all about this podcast.
Oh wow!
And apparently, there's an ongoing joke amongst the academics that because of that I am Frater RC who has returned early just to comment on their papers. And I love it. I hope they know, any of them listening, that I do it because I really believe in their work. I want people to pursue that education and know that it's out there. And I want them to not be afraid to read academic research, because it's very fascinating, informative, even if you aren't a history buff like you or I. Yeah, so I try to make that
still fascinating,
show that this
to
research
read.
is accessible. I mean, like think about Dr. Sophie Page's work on the grimoires in the monasteries. What we learned from that about how the grimoires were actually used to just as a starting point rather than the end point is all kinds of, was, you know, revolutionary. I mean, it was sort of already known, but, you know, she did a real study on it, and that sort of stuff is beyond valuable to us who practice those spiritualities, shall we say. So it does surprise me sometimes who all listens to this. For example, I just got an email from a New York publicist for Damien Eccles.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. You know, requesting me to stop sending Damien so many nudes.
Right, that's what it was all about. Nice.
No. Yeah. So capoeira.
Yeah, right. Sorry. Yeah, it was a bit of a side quest there. No, but so that was the whole reason why I sort of stopped with the Bujinkan, right? But capoeira, I technically didn't move into from Bujinkan Budo.
Okay.
I'd done Bujinkan Budo for about 20 years by the time I stopped, right? I haven't like left it per se. I haven't sent in an official letter saying I resigned from the Bujinkan or anything. Of course not. I would never do that, because I'm still I still have many fond memories of it, and I'm still very honored of all the things I got to experience in my time in the Bujinkan and everything. So that'll never change. But no, capoeira, I actually I started training in the Bujinkan when I was 15. And I actually discovered capoeira when I was 16. I discovered it through a movie called Only the Strong. Now you'll have a lot of people who know capoeira listening to this go, yeah, exactly, just like me. A lot of people will be able to nod in recognition of that. Oh yeah, Only the Strong. It's not the greatest movie in the world, but it was awesome back then when you did not know what capoeira was until you watched that movie. And I actually thought it wasn't a real martial art at that time, because I'd never heard of it before. So I thought it was just something they made up for the sake of the movie. And I found out, oh my God, this stuff is real. How awesome is that? And so I wanted to get into that alongside Bujinkan Budo. But unfortunately, it turns out that back then, in the mid-90s in Denmark, there was not a whole lot of capoeira going on. There were like 2 academies or something in Denmark, and both of them were insanely far away. And so, you know, I could just forget about that. So instead, what did I do? I just kept watching Only the Strong, and I tried to copy everything they did in the movie. So I taught myself how to do flips and kicks and all this stuff from that movie. So that was how I got started with capoeira, actually. And then eventually I found books, found titles of books, and then I had the public library order them home for me so I could read those and learn a bit about, you know, genuine capoeira, not just from this movie. But ironically, it was not until many years later I was able to actually become an official student of an actual grupo de capoeira, as we call it, a capoeira group. Right, it's kind of like as we call ryuha in Japanese, you know, like a school, right? It's the same in capoeira, but there it's called groups, because it's a group that has its own name and it practices capoeira, but it sort of has its own style of it. I mean, all of it's capoeira, but each one has kind of its own style, just like karate. It's all karate, but they're different styles. There's Shotokan karate, Kyokushin karate, Goju-ryu karate, and so on, right? So the same with capoeira. And it wasn't until many years later I finally decided, no, enough is enough. I'm going to do this thing. And I finally became a student of Grupo Asha Capoeira, the same capoeira group you have in Vancouver.
Amazing.
That's actually the headquarters, in spite of the founder, Mestre Barrão, being from Recife in Brazil. Yeah. He lived in Canada back then, and he wanted to spread out capoeira. He wanted to spread capoeira. And that's why he founded Grupo Asha Capoeira and created its base in Vancouver. And still to this day, even though Mestre Barrão doesn't live in Vancouver anymore, he moved back to Recife. His sons still live in Vancouver, and they're the ones running it. And so that whenever academy is still headquarters.
Yeah, because whenever I've seen them perform downtown, which is many times, I was always like, these guys are really, really good. Like,
They're
I was
great.
like, is everyone this good? Because it is very impressive. But they are
All of the people of their level, they are pretty
it makes
extraordinary.
sense that they're actually famous guys in the practice. So yeah,
Right.
well, I guess you need to visit Vancouver then one day.
I would love to. I would love to. I've only ever been to Toronto, so
Yeah.
and that was actually, yeah, it's interesting. We should talk about Grupo Capoeira and then it being based out of Vancouver, because my teacher
down the
in
street.
Grupo Capoeira, my first teacher there, Mestrando Paraíba, is also from Brazil, but he lives in Toronto. So I actually became a student of Ashe Capoeira Toronto.
Wow.
And he's also a famous teacher in that group. Unfortunately, he has now, a couple of years ago, he decided to leave the group. We won't get into all the politics behind it, but there were some disagreements and some stuff. And so he eventually decided that he was going to leave the group. He loves all the years he spent in it. He was born and bred Ashe Capoeira pretty much, but he decided to leave it and then he decided to start his own thing. So he has his own group now in Toronto. Many of the same students because they obviously chose to stay with their teacher. But he has a group now called Capoeira Bamba in Toronto. So still the same place. And like I said, many of the old students are still the same. But yeah, he was my first teacher. I decided to stay in the group, not because I really wanted to stay with my teacher at the same time, because I have nothing but insane amounts of admiration for that guy. He is a phenomenal teacher and an amazing capoeirista. But because of me living as far away as I do from the academia, the academy in Toronto, he told me, you just do what's best for you, because I would be more than happy for you to stay in Grupo Asha Capoeira, because I know you love the group. And I know that's why you originally wanted to join, was because of this group specifically. But I would also be more than happy to continue having you as my student if you want to go with me instead. But the decision is yours. And I think you should choose what will be the best for you in this scenario that you find yourself in. And I ultimately decided that because his group is still new, it's only in Toronto and in Mississauga. So basically, I would be confined to that. Whereas if I stay in Grupo Asha Capoeira, I can go to a variety of academies here in Europe and train with people there whenever I have the opportunity. And so I decided to do that. But we're still great friends. And like he said, hey, it doesn't matter what uniform a person is wearing. A friend is a friend for life, and that's how it stays. A good friend is a good friend, and that's regardless of whatever group you're in, whatever you do. So that's not going to change.
I really loved how many good people I met in Bujenkan, and it sounds like it's the same in Capoeira.
Absolutely.
The community there, I've had friends who did Capoeira, as you know, at the Axe, all of them at Axe, and now I know why they all went to the same place, because it's world famous and some of the best guys. Now everything's coming together now. But you get special names given to them, and they're part of it, like a family, and it's so musical and the dance fighting is dancing and it's fighting. It's both. And I can see how that would pull someone in. I mean, it was never an option for me because of joint pains and diseases I have since birth. I just can't do that stuff. Even in ninjutsu, I have to be very careful.
Right.
That's why I do so much fencing. It's because that doesn't strain me. It trains me in bad habits for ninjutsu. Like when I'm actually leveling up, when I was going through the cues in ninjutsu, my teacher at one point had to say, "You got to stop fencing at least for the next year, otherwise, because they could see the habits." And so I have occasionally had to take years off fencing at various times so that I could develop in the ninjutsu. It's sometimes very hard when you're trying to do two different things. You're training different reactions to the same response, and in fighting that can be dangerous. So yeah, amazing people I always met, which I didn't find in Taekwondo. In Taekwondo, I found a lot of angry people who wanted to hurt people. Like, sparring was a chance for a bigger guy to show littler guys how hard they could hit you in the fucking head with their feet.
Right.
And I encountered that for years until I was like, I'm done. And I just took 2 years off 4 years off martial arts, off Taekwondo, just did fencing. And then I was old enough to do ninjutsu, and found my place in the universe, as sporadic as it's been. And it's similar, it throws back to Freemasonry, you know, like there's these pockets of people that really do strive to be good people, you know, and I think that's, you know, the theme of this talk in a lot of ways, you know, how we can redeem ourselves, whether it's as witches or as Freemasons or as martial artists, as just as human beings, how we can redeem ourselves, and live fuller, more abundant lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's a very good way to pinpoint what this talk today is.
Yeah, Nietzsche would title it On Friendship.
Which
would be good, because his actual chapter on friendship says some pretty messed up shit, like women are not yet capable of friendships. Women are Vögel oder besten Falle Kühe. Like, oh, ugh. But you know, it's Zarathustra, whatever. There's a question came in while we were talking,
right,
from Brother Blaine down in Missouri, and he's a Mason and a Templar, and he says, and is Lenny himself a Templar and belong to any Templar orders outside the York Rite?
Well, first I should probably clarify that I know in at least in the US, it may be the same in Canada, I'm not quite sure, but things are
don't ask me. I don't know.
Things things are usually very, very specifically divided into, you know, you have craft Freemasonry, which is, like I said, Freemasonry with capital letters, right? And then after that, after the 3rd degree, after you become a Master Mason, then you have Scottish Rite and you have York Rite. In Scotland, that's not the case. There's no such thing as York Rite. We don't call it that. But York Rite, as far as I've understood it, even in the States, even though people usually give it that definition, York Rite and Scottish Rite. Scottish Rite is one specific thing, but the York Rite is kind of an umbrella term for separate bodies in that. For example, you know, Royal Arch, Cryptic Masonry, and Knights Templar, right? And that's how it is in Scotland. We don't call anything York Rite because these are separate bodies. So we have that after you become a Master Mason, like I said, and then after you get your mark degree, whether you get that in the blues, because here in Scotland you can get your mark degree in the blues. In some countries you only get your mark degree in the Royal Arch. It's the first thing you get because that's how you then progress in the Royal Arch. Here you can either get your mark degree in the blues after you become a Master Mason, or you can get it in the Royal Arch. But in either case, you need the mark degree before you can advance in the Royal Arch. And then after the Royal Arch, you then have, like I said, Cryptic Masonry, and then you have the Knights Templar. And then there are some specific requirements for that. Royal Arch, for example, you need to have been a Master Mason for at least a year, usually, before you will be invited to join the Royal Arch. And then you need to have been in the Royal Arch for at least a year before you will be invited to join the Knights Templar. And then there's an additional requirement. Even though Freemasonry is not a Christian thing, it's not required that you are Christian or Muslim or Jewish or anything like that, as long as you believe in a higher being or in a supreme being, as we say here in Scotland. We say you have to believe in a supreme being, but however you define that, that's entirely up to you. But you need to believe in a supreme being, right? But to join the Knights Templar, you have to be a Trinitarian Christian. That's a requirement.
Yeah. It is in the SRIA as well, isn't it?
In the SRIA and the SRIS, that's the Scottish version, the Societas Rosicruciana in Scotia. There, it's also required that you're a Trinitarian Christian. But Royal Arch, no, it's just as long as you've been a Master Mason for at least a year. At least as far as I remember, you have to have been a Master Mason for at least a year, I think. And then, like I said, at least a year in the Royal Arch before you can join the Knights Templar, and then that other requirement. But so yeah, that was a long answer to a simple question. No, I am not yet a Templar. I have been invited to join the Royal Arch. But then, of course, because of COVID and everything, that unfortunately hasn't happened yet. It was supposed to happen already. I already got my my companion regalia and everything. Even though I was told I needn't bother with that, because they said, no, if you're interested, you'll be installed as an office bearer in the chapter, and then you don't need to waste money on your regalia. But I kind of like to have my own regalia, even if I get to wear it once and I'll never ever wear it again. Well, then at least I can put it in a frame and hang it in the living room or something. Yeah, so I've been invited to join the Royal Arch, so I'm waiting for that to happen. And then eventually one day I would like to join the Knights Templar as well.
Well, it sounds like you'll be able to follow through with all that soon, thanks to the brilliant and gracious, kind and insightful governance of Boris Johnson.
Well, if everything keeps going in the right direction, which it seems right now, hopefully I'll be able to join the Royal Arch next month.
Congratulations.
If not in February, then in March. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
I'm looking very much forward to it.
That sounds like a cause to break out those tumblers, Masonic tumblers you have.
My Masonic tumblers.
The tumblers of glass, right?
Right. Yeah. My Grand Lodge whiskey glasses.
we watched a New Hope last night, and I treated myself to a little birthday Lefroy. So that's why I've been chugging so much coffee this whole interview. Plus, we started damn early for me, but
right.
Yeah. Hey, this was less strenuous than 45 minutes time crunch carving hazel with a tiny knife. Because my arm feels, oh boy, you feel it, and you only got the 45 minutes in the winter, right, for the planetary hour. Right. I had 45 minutes, so it's just like, dude, couldn't stop trying to get there. I'm trying to get it. I might want mine as thin as Ashton Chassan's, but maybe a little thicker. I don't know. It's how you use it, right?
Okay, I'm not going to touch that one.
Magic without fears. Thanks for coming on. There's one more clarifying question from a listener. In general, if someone is super interested and might want to get into dabbling in esoteric occult book publishing, what's the way? There's always the Amazon option, they say, but it feels like too many strings attached there. More like smaller run, particular selections, right. Just because. Do you have any advice to someone who might want to get into doing occult book publishing?
Oh, absolutely. Well, the first thing I would say, and I know some people will say, well, duh, and other people will be like offended. Oh, wow, so you think you're better than me or something like that. It's difficult to please everyone. But in all honesty, if someone would like to get into occult or esoteric publishing, mainly because they love the topic, they love the subject matter, but if they don't have an educational background in editing, at least, I'm not saying you have to go back to college or something and then start studying graphic media. That would be the way to go, but you don't have to. But then at least buy some excellent books on editing, on copy editing, typesetting, that type of stuff. Buy some books on publishing as well to educate yourself as much as you possibly can, because there are a lot of people out there nowadays that, because self-publishing is so easy nowadays, a lot of people seem to think that, well, any idiot can publish his or her own book. That's very true, but it doesn't mean everyone should, because there are unfortunately a lot of self-published works out there that look absolutely terrible. And I know it sounds really snobby saying that, but as a publisher, I take a tremendous amount of pride in my profession, and people don't realize how much blood, sweat, and tears goes into really learning the craft of publishing and really knowing your stuff, and having had to go through media graphics education and then having to do additional studies on your own after that, and learning so much stuff through trial and error, ending up with your first publication, you think that looks fantastic, and then a couple of years later you're looking at, oh my God, what the hell was I thinking? I should have done this, I should have done that, I should have done that better, and should have done this differently, etc., etc. And so for people to have that attitude that any idiot can self-publish, it kind of, I personally feel it's inconsiderate and borderline disrespectful to people who dedicate their professional lives to publishing and have worked really hard to get good at what they do. And that's why I always tell people, hey, the more the merrier, because the more better stuff we get out there, right? But do yourselves and everybody else a favor to educate yourself first. If you already have knowledge of editing and knowledge of book design and so on, by all means, then get straight to it. And then my suggestion would be, like I said, get a couple of good books on self-publishing first, because they're usually really dumbed down because it's self-publishing. And if you find out, yeah, this is really what I want to do, then you can get some books that are more on the publishing business and will teach you, you know, like the financial side of things, all the boring administrative stuff that you need to know, right? And then just start small scale. Don't do anything massive at first unless you want to. Don't get a big fat loan from a bank and then invest like £500,000 or something in your publishing company. You know, go small scale. If you want to invest a chunk of money, by all means, but you can do small scale at first. If you do POD, for example, print on demand, it's an easier way to get started without getting trapped in anything, having spent like thousands of pounds or thousands of dollars, and then sitting there and you don't really know what to do next, or things just don't turn out the way you wanted them to. And then don't give up, because publishing is not an easy business, especially occult or esoteric publishing, because it's such a niche market. It can be very difficult to live off of, basically, unless you go big scale. And don't compare yourself to the big timers like Samuel Weiser and Llewellyn Publications, because they have been around for decades.
Yeah.
And they have the ability, both financially and administratively speaking, to pump out 2, 3, 4 new titles a month, whereas small-time publishers will put out maybe 2 titles a year, some only 1, right? I mean, that's the same as how it goes for me, because I do so much of this work myself. It means I have full control of what I do, but it also means that a lot more responsibility falls on me. And if something is not good and customers don't like it, well, it's all on me. I can't blame anybody else. It's my fault. And it also means so much more work for me, and so it'll take that much longer to finish something. But don't be afraid to start off small and just, you know, get a feel for things first. And then if everything goes well and you decide, I want to do more of this, then you can decide if you want to spend more money, invest a bit, like make a bit of an investment and maybe publish a couple of books and then print off maybe 500 or 1,000 copies of each and stockpile those and then send them out. But POD is a good way to go. A lot of the so-called self-publishing companies like Lulu, for example, does not just have to be a self-publishing company. You can use it as just a printer and binder. So you can publish your own books, but just have them printed and bound through Lulu. That doesn't mean you're self-publishing it necessarily in that sense. You can still establish a proper publishing company, but use a quote-unquote self-publishing business like Lulu or CreateSpace.
And if you sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say I want to, with all due respect to Amazon, I love Amazon to death. I've been an Amazon customer for so many years.
I'd never bought anything off Amazon until COVID.
Seriously? Oh my God! Most of my books.
I liked my pre-COVID relationship with Amazon, whereby my only interaction with them was them sending me royalties every month. I like that. I like the idea that there was a corporation out there that only sent me money. I really liked that.
I have bought most of my books through Amazon. I have Amazon Prime membership, so we watch Prime Video, you know, constantly, and I buy and rent movies through Prime Video, etc., etc. I've bought a bunch of video games through Amazon. No, Amazon is my best friend in the world. But
hey, if you buy enough products, maybe you'll get to go on the penis rocket as a reward.
No, let's not. No, but with all due respect to Amazon, though, I would recommend, if people want to use a self-publishing company at first to print and bind their works, I would say go with Lulu over CreateSpace, because I tried just in my experimental phase where I wanted to take a look at these different companies. CreateSpace, their quality was not as good as Lulu's. Don't get me wrong, Lulu has its issues sometimes. I think that's mostly a staff issue, that sometimes they'll have some people working there that again, with all due respect to them, but in all fairness, and the truth must stand, right? They do have some staff members that sometimes seem like they don't always know what they're doing, because they will make some obvious glaring mistakes where you're like, dude, come on. Not even someone fresh out of college in printing would ever make this mistake. Come on, that should not be happening.
Yeah.
That happens sometimes, but fortunately they have fantastic customer service, and so they will very quickly remedy a situation. You know, if you contact them and say, this is not good enough, look at what I got, and you attach some pictures, they will quickly send you a brand new copy at no cost, and they will ship it express, just to make up for their blunder, right? So I know it sounds like I'm working for Lulu and I'm trying to, sell their business right now, but
you just
no,
work with them.
They do good work though. And then you have oh, come on, what's it called? It's right on the tip of my tongue.
Well, there's the big companies. Yeah, I know what you're thinking about. What's it called? They're in Canada as well.
That's the one that's
yeah.
It's right on the tip of my tongue.
Everyone listening right now is saying the name. So you
probably
know,
come on
in the comments. Someone post in the comments. Someone will do that. And if you want to find an edition, you can just look for a reputable local bookbinder, right, and get a quote from them.
Right. Granted, I would really like to recommend, if people are UK based, or at least if they don't mind books being produced in the UK, they don't need to be produced in the States or in Canada. Obviously, that can sometimes be the better choice financially speaking, but otherwise, I highly recommend William Anderson and Sons in Glasgow, because they are phenomenal at what they do. I mean, you saw the book.
Shown,
you saw the book, right?
I mean, I was curious before you first showed it to me. I was, we're fans of the art forms, so we're always a little skeptical. And I was like, wow, that's as nice as it seems they come. You saw did you check out the link I sent you to Paul Tronson's work?
Yes,
over in Victoria, BC. Yeah, no, he's on a, I don't want to say on another level, but let's call him, he's a literally unique individual. Like he's the guy he just rebound the Gutenberg Bible, like the Gutenberg Bible and the Queen's Bible. And he charges, he's like $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 for a book. A lot of people see his website and be like, hey, I've got this copy of this old text, can you bind it for me? It's like, it's sentimental value. And he'll be like, I think I'm the wrong person for that job. And they'll be like, wow. He's like, my base rate is like 20. I don't know. You can check it. But Paul Tronson's periodfindbindings.com does some of the most amazing work. And he's one of the most significant yet unknown occultists of in the world. Like, he has editions, he has manuscripts of Abramelin and Key of Solomon that still haven't seen the light of day.
I remember.
Crazy. We are only scratching the surface, people. The realm of the occult is still largely unearthed. I mean, if someone wants to start doing like put out new books, wants an easy place to start, we still don't have all of Abraham Abulafia's works translated and published. There's a simple no-brainer. Like, everyone who doesn't want to read Abulafia, I'm still stuck practicing techniques from R.E.A. Kaplan's meditations on the Kabbalah, right? And fortunately, I do read Hebrew, and so I do dip into the source texts. I'm not so fast as I was in seminary, but I still can get it. But Abulafia translated would be a fabulous thing to be done well by someone out there. I'm saying it because I'd love to buy them. Someone please go make them and do it right, do it well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, that's why, like I said before, the more the merrier. Is, I know some people will think, oh no, but why would a publisher give out like a trade secrets, to other potential publishers or people who are thinking about getting into it? But no, it's not, because it's not so much of a competition, because there's enough work to go around, right? And as a book geek myself, as an honest book nerd, I just love to see great works coming out, whether I put them out myself or someone else does. I mean, that was why I got into publishing originally, because there were certain books that I just really wanted to see out there, and they just weren't. And so I decided, I'll do it myself. I have an education in graphic media. I know my stuff, then I'll just do it. And that's actually how it started, just for selfish reasons, not work-wise, but just in terms of a book I really wanted to see available in English. And so I decided to do it myself. I contacted the right people, signed a contract for the rights, and then put it out there just so I could have that book on my bookcase.
Yeah.
That's how it began.
This is the way. Yeah, man, the great episode of the Book of Boba Fett last night. It was the best ever. And it's the funny thing is Boba Fett wasn't even in it. It was basically an episode of The Mandalorian. And the best one yet. I don't know. I'm just talking. Sorry, I've got Star Wars on the brain because I just been watching it through it this week during my birthday week and just enjoying. We've gone from episode 1. Now we're at New Hope, doing all of them sequentially. And it's I just want a lightsaber, man. I just want a fucking lightsaber. Is that so much to ask? Come on, Elon, make us lightsabers. Nothing will go wrong with that. No,
of course not. Of course not. Every child should have one.
There's that meme going around from A New Hope of Luke Skywalker, and it shows that Luke Skywalker gets lightsaber, immediately points it at his face. Oh, you've paused. I don't even know if you heard me. Well, we are at the end anyway. Will you unpause? Maybe not. No. It looks like I'm getting a message, and we've lost Lenny. All right. Well, thank you for being on Magic Without Fears. His computer crashed. This was the end anyway. This was the way. Thank you all for listening, and I'm sure we'll do more with Lenny in the future. Oh, he says, hang on, I'll get right back. Okay, well, either way, we'll maybe make whatever we say next as a bonus for my exclusive subscribers. You can please support the podcast at hermeticpodcast.com or magicwithoutfears.com. I have 2 because, Facebook banned one of the URLs for some reason. I don't know. And yeah, it's been a treat, been a slice to have Lenny here. I'll just message him and say okay if he wants to come back. Yeah. In the meantime, I'm perfectly capable of talking on my own. Though I don't know what else to say right now. Maybe I'll just say, got some exciting guests coming up. Dr. Sasha Chateau, the foremost scholar of Josephine Paladin in the English-speaking world. She actually started her studies at the University of Exeter, where I was doing my doctorate through with Nicholas Goodrich Clark. Then she finished her PhD at University of Essex, and she'll be on second week of February. So if anyone has questions about Josephine Paladin, he wrote the book from How to Be a Mage that's very popular out there right now. So if you want to read How to Be a Mage, we're going to talk about that with Dr. Chateau, and as well as many other things. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for listening. Love to everyone. Stay safe. Continue. And we're back. Why stop doing a good thing, right?
Yeah, so sorry about my computer.
It's all right.
I have no idea what happened there.
I mean, we did good. I mean, let's face it. Even if we went to 4th hour, we have literally no other common points of interests or anything we could cover at this point. We've talked about literally all of our common interests completely. So there's nothing else we could talk about. So tell us where to find you. What's your website?
Well, that's a wee bit problematic.
We know it's down. We know it's down. What will it be?
Unfortunately,
so people can get this book.
The website.
All these books.
Right. The website is www.hermeticscienceenterprises, no hyphens, no dashes, no nothing, hermeticscienceenterprises.com. But because we're changing web hosts, and because the old website, I had to give that up and wanted to do something else and do something to improve the shopping functions on the website. I decided to go with a different host and all that, and now I can't move my old domain. Well, no, I can, but apparently I have to wait 45 days or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So that's why it's down right now. but it should be up soon. Well, soon-ish. But in the meantime, though, I'm going to set it up with another domain so that it will run off of both. It's just the .com one is the one I've used since day one. And so I really wanted to keep that one. And it's the one that gets put in the back of the books and so on. But otherwise, people will also be able to find it under a different domain, which I will happily give once it's properly up and running.
Yeah, and I'll let people know. I'm pretty on top of my social media. Sadly, I wish I wasn't.
Right.
I wish I was like, I would do more, folks, but I just have so many things to do out there in the world right now. But no, so we'll let people know. Thanks for listening, everybody. But we're going to do a little exclusive subscriber segment since I am going to start phasing my podcast. It's moving into its third year in March, and I'm going to actually probably leave the platform I'm on because they've taken away some of my Red Circle has taken away some of my the tools that I used and made them that I have to pay for those tools. Like I don't really I lose trust in a business that after I've invested in it takes away tools, wants to charge me for tools that originally were free. I lose trust in that. I don't respect that. So I may move away. It looks like I'm going to move away from the and even stop putting ads in my podcast, which I do, just to cover the cost of Zoom and graphic design, basically just those two bills, and that's all it really does cover is like $45 a month, $50 a month.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to move away from that, and I'm going to move to a more subscription-based model with more bonus content, just because it seems like that's what people actually want. And so, hey, I don't care how I'll do it however people want me to do it.
Right.
So yeah, that's how the cookie crumbles.
All right.
So let's do moving into thanks for being here. Now into some exclusive content. Let's talk a little bit about Grimoire magic or something like that. Maybe I can even entice you to have a dram. It's earlier for it. You have no excuse because it's earlier for me, and I was thinking I might have a wee dram while we do this exclusive talk. You're welcome to join me. You don't have to join me.
Well, I could, but I would have to leave for a couple of minutes because it's in the living room.
That's fine. While you do that, I will read us a poem by W.B. Yeats.
All right, then I will be right back.